This is making me nervous. There we go. All right.
A stupid question, August, but you're sure this is recording?
I am quite sure. I see a red dot on my screen, so that's probably it's a good sign, right? And in a minute here, we'll see if we show up on YouTube. This is just a peak narcissism looking at ourselves live on YouTube. There we go.
That's what you have on your second screen, right?
That's right. Just I'm looking at myself with a few seconds delay on another screen just to boost my.
So if you notice August looking off to the side, he's just admiring his hairdo.
That is right. Cool. All right. Welcome, live audience. And it's cool of you to join us on this live boat shopping episode. Really fun to get back into this again, and we're going to do two listings today from the Quarterdeck. Listings provided by our members, and we're gonna tear them apart and look at them and say what we think. We're gonna do one first, and then we'll have a little break, and then we'll do the other one afterwards. So
both of these are coming out on the podcast as audio, and then the video, if you want to watch the video after it's been recorded, it'll be up on the Quarterdeck for interaction on there with the members.
That is right. So, and on the Quarterdeck, of course, you can see the discussion, see what's happening around this, get the links to the actual listings, and all of that. So, very
August,
exciting.
Check out my matching cup here. Do you notice the similarity?
Very nice. That is cool. Oh, is that the good old around the world?
Yeah, this was my dad's mug. He was at the start of the BOC challenge around alone. It was called. It was like a 5-stop solo thing, 1982-83, and that coffee cup's been sitting in my house growing up, and I really have always liked the logo. So it's defunct,
cool.
It doesn't exist anymore. So we have borrowed the inspiration and made it our logo.
That's the origin right there. Very cool.
There you have it.
Cheers, Skipper.
Cheers.
I have mine. It doesn't have as cool of an artwork as you, but it does say "Daddy Cool" on it, so it's got that going for it.
Nice.
All right, you ready to talk about boats, Andy?
I love it. I love doing this more than anything, I think. I mean, this is back to the how can we record things we would talk about anything anyway? Well, here we are.
Here we are, indeed. Okay, so let's just get right into it then. I will find our first listing, which is this one right here, and this is a very interesting one. This is a Ted Brewer custom design, 1983 Blue Water Cruising. This is just the headline for $35,000 US, and this one, well, let's just describe it briefly, since with the one-off, there's no picture of this showing up in anybody's heads, since this is truly a unique boat. But here we go. We're looking at a kind of a I would say it's a high freeboard, a pretty like cut off flat stern with a stern hung rudder on it, full cockpit enclosure, and we've got an arc with solar panels on it, and we got a pretty high like couch roof and what looks to be a fairly conservative mast. Would you agree, Andy?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's a double spreader rig. It looks proportional, maybe I mean, the whole boat kind of just oozes this is a cruising boat feel to it. So whether you want to interpret that as conservative, probably. I mean, we had a debate before we started the recording here is what's the boat made out of? I think it's steel, but it doesn't actually say. I mean, this is also a Craigslist listing. So this is like a for sale by owner, unique situation. I'll come back to that because I think there's some interesting buys you can have on these listings like this that are non-broker. That's how I bought my both of our boats here in Sweden, actually. It's hard to say, but you have the first thing I noticed, you have an externally hung rudder on the back there as well. So the whole thing just kind of shouts, "This is a conservative cruising boat" to me.
Yes, absolutely, and it's interesting, right? Because like that's all we're kind of groping a little bit blind here because we're looking at one-offs like this, custom designs, you don't really have anything to help you along. You're very much alone in figuring out what this thing is. Like we only have the information provided by the seller, which is the pictures and the details, the description of the boat, which we're gonna get into in a little bit. But when you're looking at other boats, you can go on forums and you can find reviews, right, of the boats, and even like sailing magazines do reviews of boats, and you can ask people. Here we essentially have nothing, only what we can deduce ourselves. And
to that point, that's kind of what makes these sort of one-off boats can be very good buys, meaning you can get a lot of boat for a lot for not a lot of money. And incidentally, we were at the Stockholm Boat Show this past weekend and had lunch with our friends Linda and Ludwig. Ludwig is the designer at Rutgerson Marine. They live on the west coast of Sweden, and they went around the world in a Joshua type steel ketch, like a Moitessier replica, over 4 or 5 years. This was probably 10 years ago now. But anyway, they're looking for a new boat because they just sold their boat Mary, and they're looking for a new boat. And I asked them what they're looking for, and they specifically want an aluminum sort of high latitudes, swing keel, shallow draft, sort of expedition type boat. But they are specifically, and they're very knowledgeable people, so they know what they're looking for. But they are specifically looking for a one-off boat like this that might not have as big of a market as, say, an Ovni or some of these other kind of brand name production boats that have a market and a higher asking price only because people know what they are. So I think I really like this kind of, you can find a really good boat, but it is higher stakes because you just, like you said, you just don't know that much about it.
yeah, and there's if you really know what you want, you might find that could be some real gems to find in these custom designs, because when you have these serial produced boats by yards, they need to design a boat that will fit a very wide audience. So they need to make a boat that applies to a lot of different use cases to sell the boats. Whereas these custom designs, very often they are made for and by people who have a very, very specific use case in mind. And if that matches yours, then you could really make a great deal and find a unique boat that really kind of without as many compromises as you would have to accept otherwise.
So we
which
have
is really cool.
I've created a format for these boat shopping episodes, so we kind of have a repeatable structure that's, like I said, entertaining and educational. And that actually comes up. The last category of our format here is, who is this boat for? And this boat was literally for one specific person when it was built. So we'll come back around to that. But more on the intro style, I mean, we do know it's a Ted Brewer custom design. So, like, who is Ted Brewer? He's a pretty pedigreed designer. And he was best known for a design philosophy. He called it the Brewer Bite, or people labeled it the Brewer Bite. And it was a distinct indentation or hollow in the hull shape just forward of I think it was between the rudder and the keel.
Yeah, it's that's right. So you kind of leave, if you take a full keel and then kind of take a semicircle and bite out of the kind of aft 3/4 of the keel, and to make it a little bit of a skeg and a fin.
It was, it basically reduced wetted surface area, so you had better light air performance was the idea. I mean, it sounded, it was kind of, I guess, ahead of its time at the time, but now it's like you don't ever have anything connecting the keel and the rudder. It's kind of silly to have that, but back in the day, it was like, okay, you get kind of the benefits of a full keel with less wetted surface area was the thinking. So, but Ted Brewer was like, he was a legitimate designer. He designed the Whitby 42, which is a famous cruising boat. It was a ketch, one of my dad's favorite boats. The Brewer 44, and then the Gulf Star and other production boats. So Gulf Star 50, my friends Tom and Darlene, who you know as well,
Mm.
his like all-time boat, if he was going to buy a bigger boat, would be a Gulf Star 50. And these are all kind of classic 1980s, 90s conservative, salty looking cruising boats that sailed well, but didn't look fast.
Mm.
And that was kind of what Ted Brewer was known for. So just knowing a little bit about the designer, you know what you're kind of getting. It's going to be a seaworthy boat. Dare I say slow, maybe by our standards, but seaworthy and I guess you could say, I might say slow. Somebody else might say moderate or balanced.
Maybe.
But it's basically meant to be a long distance live aboard cruising boat, a cruising boat in the essence of it. It wasn't trying to combine cruiser racer. It wasn't trying to beat any racing rules. It was just trying to be a practical boat that you could sail around and live on.
That's right. I'm a huge fan of Ted Brewer
Look at
myself.
this.
I have this book I recommend very much. Ted Brewer explains sailboat design. It's an old book that I got this used. When I was a teenager, and it says it's for Del Blair, the Christmas of 1988. From Dave and Deb. So it's this
Dave
this
and
one's
Deb,
been
if you're
around.
listening, August has your book.
I got your book. I didn't steal it, I promise. There's also a library stamp in here, so maybe they stole it. I think Dave and Deb might have stolen it. It's a little tight on the money that Christmas, but this is a fantastic book. It's really good. It explains sailboat design from the ground up, and it was kind of, this book really helped me get into all of this. And it says here in the front, learn from a noted naval architect what makes a sailboat go, what makes her good, fast, bad, slow, seaworthy, or dangerous. Then you can decide for yourself. And that is just the perfect.
I quite like the idea of finding a designer that you really like their philosophy and looking for their boats. I mean, Bob Perry comes up a lot on this podcast because we got to know him and he helped us with Falcon and with the new rig on Spica. But like, if I was starting from a blank slate, I'd be like, I really like Bob Perry and his philosophy. Let's see what Bob Perry boats are out there and just kind of start there. I think that's a really good. In fact, I don't think this exists, but I wish there was a way on Yacht World to just like search for boats by designer, because a lot of designers like Bob Perry bounced around to all these different production facilities.
Mm.
These productions would buy their designs, or they had one-offs, like in this case. But I always thought that'd be a really fun way to search boat listings. Is like, all right, I want a Bob Perry boat between 38 and 44 feet. Show me what we have out there.
Yeah, that'd be really really fun. And you would get a lot of different things because especially I know for sure Ted Brewer, he's made everything, boats from every type of material. He was involved in several like America's Cup boats as well, so he could definitely make fast racers too. And he did a lot of cruising and racing himself as well his whole life. And he sadly passed away a couple of years ago now after a very long life, but definitely one of the big names out there. And so having his name on this is definitely a positive for sure.
How big was this boat again we're looking at? I'm just looking something up here.
Yeah, and what was it, 35 or 30? Is a Let me see, 35.
35. Okay. So we'll come back to this when we get to the numbers, but I have a good little example here. So, all right. So should we start going into my categories here, August?
Let's do it.
First of all, do we know where this boat was built?
We do not, and that is another one of those very important details that we're missing. Because that is, should we talk about that now? Like the client, we might as well talk about that at the top, I think, because it's so unique now with you when you have a one-off like this, and because one thing is like, who is the designer? Very very important for sure, but I think this might be controversial, but it's who the customer is might be like even more important, because that's the who gives the design brief, right? And so oftentimes, like you mentioned, you'll have a yard, right? They will approach a designer and hire them to create a specific type of boat that they want, and they want the boat to be, good at certain things, and they'll compromise on other things and trying to make a balanced design that will sell well to a certain audience. And but we and you'll know what that is when you buy a production boat. But here we have absolutely no idea. Somebody at some point approached Ted Brewer with an idea and helped him make this boat. And Ted Brewer is not going to design a bad boat because he's an excellent designer, but he's going to make the kind of boat that his client wants him to make. And and so, was his ideas good? Were they bad? We kind of don't know. And it's again, Bob Perry. He is very outspoken about how all this works. And there was an interview where I read something. Well, somebody asked Bob Perry, because he has a lot of double enders, a lot of canoe sterns that he's designed, and like what makes the canoe stern so great, or what is it about the double ender that you like so much? And he said, like, I don't like them. Just I made them because people asked me to make them. I don't like them at all. Right? And so
he's kind of known for that. I mean, his most famous boats, Tiana 37 and a Valiant 40, both have canoe sterns, and like he's like, no, this isn't me. It's just they became popular. Sorry.
So you never quite know, right? And we're kind of putting a lot of trust in the original client here, who had this made.
Well, this is a good segue, because the first category I have here for us is called Broker BS. And what is the listing actually trying to sell us? This is interesting because it's not a broker, like we said at the top. This is a private listing on Craigslist, which is, I keep talking about Blocket over here in Sweden, which is basically the same thing. So, August, if you want to maybe summarize or maybe just read from the listing, there's not much here, but what would you say the kind of the seller is trying to sell us here?
I mean, it's all in the headline, right? It's Ted Brewer custom design 1983 blue water cruising. That's what it says. And so I think, that's it right there. And then they are showing us some, there's a lot of, there's way too few pictures overall, but there's, some of these pictures like trying to sell the experience. You have this woman at the tiller here looking very pleased with herself and happy. And so they're definitely trying to sell that long distance adventure, I think.
There's a line in here. I mean, most of the listing is just bullet points, but there's one sentence that says, I bought the boat in 2012. So right off the bat, we know that this person was not the design, or not the builder, not the original person that commissioned this. Bought the boat in 2012, lived on it for 7 years, cruising the full length of the Canadian West Coast in Haida Gwaii. I don't know what that is. Where is that? I guess that's somewhere in BC. I've heard of it before, but it's a place in Canada.
Yeah, I think is that like an Indian reservation or something?
Probably.
I think so.
And then she goes on to, I say she only because there's a picture of a woman in the cockpit, but the person that lists this goes on to say, I upgraded and maintained a well-maintained vessel, and then goes on with a list of upgrades that we can come back to. But I mean, I guess this begs the question, is this person doing a very good job of selling this boat?
Well,
in the salesy sense of the word.
Well, it's very kind of straight to the point, and I'd say, look, there's just not enough information on here at all. But you're kind of getting, I think it's a very kind of honest, in a way that it doesn't look too dolled up, right? It's like hardly organized in the photos, and it's like it comes off as quite authentic, I would say.
So maybe we can tweak this. We said this is a new format for these type of shows here. Maybe this broker BS category could be on a scale, because like I'm seeing there actually probably isn't very much BS in this. This is kind of, you see you get what you see, and they're not trying to sell you anything or hide anything, which can be very commonplace when you see a brokerage listing where everything is just the best. So maybe on the broker BS scale, this would be a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, I would say that the blue water cruising might be like a little bit off. This is not like a blue water boat, I wouldn't say, and also like
you don't think so? I might push. Well, I don't know. When we come back into some of the specific categories here, I think we might get to that. I might disagree with you on that.
Okay, interesting, cool.
At least in the some of the points it has for it. It might not be quite ready for blue water, but that's sometimes down to maintenance, not design.
Right. It's hard to like. I just think she looks so top heavy and like underpowered. But it's hard to say, right? Because we don't have the numbers on any of this.
So let's all right. So let's just say I don't think there's too much BS going on in this listing. But if anything, it's not a great sales pitch at all because there's not enough information. Is kind of my conclusion to this first category here. Not so much BS, but maybe lacking in information.
That's right. I mean, one thing you can, we're trying to teach people how to buy boats here, but there might be some knowledge to pick up about how to sell boats on the flip side, and you can never have too much information in a boat listings. If you're selling your boat, just put like hundreds of photos and booklets of information.
And then people like us can come along and pick them apart.
That's right.
Okay, so let's. One thing I think maybe we didn't mention is the asking price, $35,000, and this is maybe what you were getting at when you combine the words blue water cruising for a price tag of $35,000. That seems fishy to me. Again, that could be down to the fact that it's a one-off boat. There's not a big market for it. We don't know what this person paid for the boat in the first place. You can't do like brokers can do like a sold boats listing where you can compare what did other boats like yours sell for. Well, we don't have that in this case. So $35,000 is not a lot of money for a 35-foot boat, particularly one that is claiming to be ready for blue water cruising. But if it turns out that, this actually is what they say it is, then you have a very good bargain.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay, moving on to our second category. I'm calling this the dock walk. What are the first impressions from the listing? So this is basically August, where you and I will go through the limited photos that we have, and I think ignoring the bullet points, because we'll come back to some of the specifics that they mentioned in the listing. But I think we should go through the photos, again, being this an audio medium, trying to describe as best we can what do we see, what stands out to us when we flip through the photos on this boat. I kind of hinted at this at the beginning where you said maybe it's conservatively rigged or under-rigged, and I said, oh, maybe it's a moderate cruising boat, whatever. So let's go through that. Let's pretend we are walking down the dock and we come across this boat with a for sale sign on it, and it piques our interest. What are the first things you notice? And I'm specifically looking at this photo of the boat parked at the dock that gives us a kind of reasonable overview. So what are some of the first things you notice?
Well, I'd say like it's definitely made for like, this is not a day sailor. This is made for adventuring, right? You've got you got this full cockpit enclosure. You have the solar panels and the arc on there. Like it's definitely ready to go adventuring. There's what looks like a canoe on the foredeck up there. And
I see that. I think that's a staysail in a bag. Isn't it the blue? Is that what you're looking at, or are you looking at something else?
Yeah, the very light baby blue.
Oh, yeah, I do see it on the opposite side of the mast now. I thought that was something in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't notice that. There you go.
Yeah. So, and it's quite big, quite stocky. I would say that this is a great kind of coastal adventure boat. That's also, we got some. There is this. You're right. There is a staysail up there. There is a cutter stay with, I think, probably a hank-on staysail on the foredeck. And we got a spinnaker pole, and, so she definitely...
Yeah, I noticed.
She's not a motorboat. So,
I was going to say that. I noticed. So you notice a double spreader rig. You've got a spinnaker pole, which looks to be mounted on the mast, which is a really nice way to stow it and also make it easier to use. You've got that staysail, which is clearly on a hanked-on stay. and it looks to be permanently rigged because it's got a sail cover on it. I see this externally mounted rudder on the stern.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a maintenance thing in a good way. There's no rudder post. A lot of these old boats, you have to fear for corrosion of the rudder post. We don't have to worry about that here because you've got, what are they called, like pintles and gudgeons? Is that how those rudders attach? I think that's the word.
Wow, that's esoteric. Nice.
And then I'm also noticing I particularly like the look of these square port lights. I don't love how far forward the coach roof extends
Hmm.
because just aesthetically, but I do like they're pretty plain square port lights. I think they're not trying to do too much with the styling. I kind of like that. I think to me the boat, I don't disagree with you that it has a bit of a stocky look to it, but it is aesthetically pleasing. My dad and I always joke that like even kind of the boats it looks proportional. It looks
Hmm.
it looks pleasing to. There's nothing that obviously stands out. It's a handsome looking boat. I wouldn't call it necessarily a pretty boat, but it's got a nice sheer line. I mean, right off the bat, it stands out to me because it's dark blue, and all boats that are dark colors always look better than their white colored cousins, I think. So you might be fooled a little bit by that as well. And there's a design trick in here as well where the hull is blue, but it's got a fairly thick stripe at the bulwarks. I believe that's called the is it the cove? I always mix up the cove stripe and the boot stripe. One of them is at the top, one of them is at the bottom of the freeboard.
Hmm.
I forget which is which. Someone will correct me, but you've got a stripe on the waterline that differentiates the hull, the top side's paint versus from the bottom paint, and then you've got another stripe where the bulwarks are. And what those white stripes on either side of the blue do is it makes the boat appear to have a lesser freeboard than it actually does. If the whole boat was painted white, it would look like a much higher freeboard from the waterline to the deck level than having the blue in the middle and the thick white stripe on either side of that. It breaks up the lines of the boat. So that's kind of a
Yeah.
design trick that they do. I also
And she
noticed.
still looks like she has a massive freeboard,
Well,
even with that.
yes. I mean, that's the problem I mean, this boat's only 35 feet long. It's unless our boat Spica, an OE36, is similar length to this and way smaller because the designer did prioritize aesthetics over practicality. So the volume of my boat is probably half the volume of this boat
Hmm.
but my boat looks a lot nicer sitting at the dock. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah, and
But
also she'll sail a lot better to windward, right?
Sure.
There's definitely some practical aspects to that as well.
I noticed like you said, the arch at the back with the solar panels. They also have a little stubby radar pole above that with a radar attached to it. It's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe there's something going on with the backstay there. Maybe there's a SSB terminals or something on there. There's definitely something coming off the backstay part way up that's hard to tell in the photos. And
Yeah.
then you've got the right off the bat you can tell that it's a sail cover with lazy jacks. So it's going to be a traditional slab reefing mainsail, which I like. It's got a Dodger and a Bimini. I think August, you want to give your rant on Biminis?
Yeah, I hate biminis, but then I'm also 2 meters tall, so that's kind of, it's just we're natural enemies. It's it's just like the one place in a boat where you can kind of stretch and see the stars and kind of really flail your arms around a little bit, and you kind of get this. Yeah, you want to put a roof over the sky. I'm not very happy about that, but then that's also being used to sailing mostly up in the higher latitudes where you don't really need it so much. But
So one thing, I'm going to flip to the next photo. It's number 4. It's basically showing the boat bow on, and you can see very nice. Actually, that canoe you talked about looks to be in the water. It looks more like a sort of a long, low sailing dinghy. And actually, the dinghy itself looks like a beautiful piece of artwork. It looks like it's wood epoxy. It's got a little centerboard slot there in the middle. It looks like it has maybe a sailing rig somewhere with it.
yeah, very
That
nice.
dinghy. So the dinghy right off the bat, I mean, that dinghy looks to be in very nice shape. I mean, the boat looks to be in pretty good shape. You don't see any obvious signs just from the photo. But one thing that also tells me that it's at least a reasonably knowledgeable owner is they've got a Vulcan anchor on one of the 2 bow rollers. There's a Bruce anchor on the other one. So just seeing that modern Vulcan anchor means at least they've done their research on ground tackle. Then it's got a roller furler on the bow there. That's a pro furl. happen to very much dislike pro furl furlers, but we'll come back to that when we talk about some of the specifics. I notice pleasantly there's not a lot of wood in these exterior photos. The handrails on top of the coach roof are stainless, and that leads me to believe also that I believe this boat is steel. And I believe that because of the way the bulwarks look, and we'll get to some of the interior photos when we get to that. But it doesn't say it in the listing, but usually custom boats are steel because they don't need a mold to be built from, so it's cheaper to build. And also, if it was a custom design but a home-built boat, most home-built boats are steel. Although it has round sides, most home-built metal boats are sort of hard chined. So that if this is steel, being that it's round, tells me it probably was built at a professional yard.
Really goes to, that's really interesting that we had a little session here before we went live, like trying to figure out like what actually is this boat made out of. We don't even know that. And yeah, like we don't even know if it was professionally made or if this guy made it in his backyard, or gal, which is interesting. I also see we got a life raft up on the couch roof there. Okay. It looks like
also a gas can.
Also a gas can. This is and we've got a barbecue on the back. There's a third anchor up in the bow. Is he kind of stacked up against the push bit there?
Wow, yeah, okay.
So I mean, they're truly ready for anything. This one. So that is cool. So should we move on to the?
Well, just to wrap this category up, this dockwalk category, do you like this boat?
I like it. I think it's got like the pure kind of adventure machine vibe coming off it, which I think is really cool. And I agree. I think it's a good looking. Yeah, it's not a pretty boat, but it's a very solid kind of. It looks rugged. It looks. I like it. The sheer lines. There's a little bit of overhang both in the bow and the stern, and it's great. Probably I would be very happy kind of going day sailing along the Canadian coast with this, as these people have been doing. I think that's a perfect boat for that. Whether I would like to be kind of in a storm out in the ocean in this, I'm not so sure about, but no, I'm very pleased so far.
I like the boat too. I think it reminds me of a Jeep. It's like maybe a Jeep that you see that's got like a lift on it with bigger tires and maybe like a roof rack with a bunch of gear strapped to it. It feels like an overland Jeep, or like almost like Lee's our high top VW camper van. Kind of ugly, but pretty cool to look at, eye catching with all the stuff you need for adventures. I that's kind of the general vibe I get from this. One more quick thing I noticed about the thing, that it's got winches on the mast, which tells me that none of the lines lead back to the cockpit, which I think that to me is a plus on a smaller boat like this. But we can come back to that. Okay, moving on to the next category. This one's going to be tougher to do. This category is called numbers, and this is basically what do the specs tell us and what do they not tell us. Now, typically I will go to sailboatdata.com and look up all these numbers, but being that this is a custom one-off, there's not going to be a sailboat data listing. But we can start with the actual listing itself. August, if you want to go to the Craigslist listing and just run through what specs we have here, not with equipment, with the boat itself.
That's right. So we have some information here. She's 35 foot long. She's got an 11.5 foot beam, 5.5 foot depth, cutter rig, keel with skeg protection for rudder. So we don't actually have a photo of our members on the Quarterdeck had to do some digging to find a photo of what she looks like underneath the water, which is interesting. But yeah, so we know there's a skeg. We'll take a look at that afterwards. Tiller steering, full cockpit cover with side curtains, large jib winches, rolling furling headsail, 3 headsails, and self-tending staysail. Self-tending staysail. What would you It's not a self-tacking.
Self-tacking. That's just another way to say that. Yeah.
But did I see a? Don't you need like a
boom
track for that?
Let's see here.
I don't see a track.
There is. It's hard to tell in the photos. You could manage it with a little bridle, and it feels like I do think maybe I see a little bridle between the handrails.
maybe there is a little jib boom in here.
Yeah,
Look at
no,
that.
there definitely is. There's a boom
Yeah.
inside this, wrapped up inside the
Oh,
flake
very
snail.
cool.
Yeah, there you
Okay,
go.
that's nice.
But
That's
hang on,
nice.
you're getting ahead of me here.
Yeah, sorry.
This section is just supposed to be about numbers, and the point being that we only have three numbers. We have a 35 feet LOA, 11 and a half foot beam, 5.5 foot depth. We don't even have a displacement. We don't know how much this boat weighs.
Hmm.
So this is going to be a very difficult one to pick apart the numbers. So what I've done, I found on Sailboat Data. This is a very different boat, but Ted Brewer designed a boat called a Jason 35, which is 35 feet long, also cutter rigged. So kind of in the same vein, but it looks a lot prettier. This looks actually kind of like it has a canoe stern. Looks like almost like a could mistake it for a Tiana 37. You couldn't if you know what you're looking at, but it's that sort of vibe. External chain plates. But anyway, just to get a comparison, this also, if you look this up yourself on Sailboat Data, has the classic Brewer bite we were talking about at the top of this episode.
Do you want to share your screen or send it to me?
Sure. No, yeah, here we go. Yeah, I can try a screen share here. Let's see this. Screen. I want the Jason 35. Here we go. All right, can you see this here, August?
I can, yes.
All right, so here's the Jason 35. Actually, really cool looking boat. If I was looking for a Ted Brewer boat, this would be the top of my list. But anyway, you can see the Brewer bite right here in the drawing. That's that little cutout between the back of the keel and where the rudder is. But I pulled this up just to look at the numbers. So this is an LOA of 34.5 feet, so similar to our one-off steel boat we're looking at. Waterline length of 27. That's quite a lot of waterline for a boat. I mean, it doesn't have that much overhangs. We've got a sail area of 634 square feet, 11.1 foot beam, so this is slightly narrower. Displacement of 16,000 pounds. That is awfully heavy. In comparison, my boat, the OE 36, is 36 feet LOA and is a displacement of only like 11,000 pounds. And even my boat's a heavy boat. Of that, 6,200 pounds of ballast, max draft 5 feet. So that's sort of in the ballpark.
Quite similar, yeah.
And we've got our numbers down here. These are the numbers that I really like to look at. Our calculations, so sail area to displacement, that's the ratio of how much sail versus how much the boat weighs. That's 15.5. So that's kind of, we've talked about this a lot before, but that's in the ballpark of like, this will be a good sailing boat, but not high performance. Say anything over 15 is okay. Anything under 15 is really a deal breaker in my mind.
Right.
Ballast to displacement, so that's the ratio of how much ballast versus displacement. So that's kind of gives you an indication of how stiff the boat's going to be, 36. That's also not entirely true because stiffness is also dependent on hull shape, how beamy is the boat. A more beamy boat requires less ballast to get the same amount of stiffness. Displacement to length, this is like how heavy is the boat. So this is basically a ratio of the displacement weight versus the waterline length. So the higher the number, the heavier the boat, and this is 367. That is quite up there. Comfort ratio, that's a little more subjective, and I don't recall the scale for that. It's 35 on this boat. I don't remember what those numbers mean.
I know that it was actually Ted Brewer who came up with the comfort ratio.
There you go.
And it is a formula. So it's not. It is objective in that sense, and I don't. It's quite complicated, but it is. It's meant to try and put some tangible numbers to how it would behave in a seaway, and it's a formula where it's like displacement divided by waterline length times beam squared, stuff like that, and it gives you an idea of how well it will behave in a seaway.
Same thing, this capsize screening formula is also a number based on how likely is the boat to capsize. Then you have a theoretical hull speed, 7 knots. And then this one's an interesting one, pounds per square inch of immersion. This is basically carrying capacity. Like how much weight do you need to put on this boat before the waterline will sink by an inch? So the higher that number, the more carrying capacity you have. And Lyle Hess, who designed the Bristol Channel Cutter, was famous for designing boats that basically you could load up with a ton of gear and not really affect the performance. So the higher that number, the more carrying capacity it has in a cruising sense, and the more stuff you can put on it without significantly slowing the boat down. The far extreme of that is that Far 40 we were looking at as a race boat to buy maybe in Sweden. That was extremely lightweight, and it's going to be very affected by the amount of weight you put on it, because it's going to start to sink on its waterline and really slow down. So I thought
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. So this could be a very different rig and sail plan. I mean, it is a cutter. This Jason 35 is a classic cutter rig. The mast is almost in the middle of the boat. It's also got a boom on the staysail. So if we assume that this boat is similarly proportioned to our custom brewer that we're looking at on the listing, then I would say that these numbers kind of back up our initial impressions that this is a conservative, classic cruising boat. These numbers are going to look very similar across boats designed for this purpose of this era. So I think we hit the nail on the head at the top of this episode there. Okay, so let's see here. Moving along, our next category is the design DNA. I actually think we kind of touched on that quite a bit. So maybe we can modify this format on the fly here as we go. But I believe we kind of summarize that this boat is designed to be a cruising boat, an out-and-out cruising boat.
Yes.
Here's a fun category: living aboard, life aboard. This is where we can dive into some of the interior photos and some of the more close-up stuff. The point of this is what it would actually be like to live on this boat. Now, the seller says they lived on it for 7 years. So clearly it must have worked. Either they had something, funky going on in life and needed to live on the boat, didn't have a choice, or it worked well enough that it was comfortable enough to live on for 7 years. And I think that's kind of my first impression, is that second category. So let me stop my screen share here, Augustin, if you want to take over.
Actually, already stole it.
You already stole it. Good.
There we go.
So what do we think this boat's gonna be like to live on? We can talk about the interior arrangement, the berth arrangement, the practicalities of the galley, the head, et cetera, et cetera. Let's where do you want to start?
Well, there are some unique things here that I find very interesting. First, if you kind of just look at the layout of what it looks like inside, you're coming down the companionway here, and the first thing that greets you is this enormous coffee thermos thing mounted on the bulkhead. You see that?
I see it, yeah.
Just as you're standing in the companionway, you have this enormous 20-liter coffee dispenser on the wall right by the galley, which is quite interesting. And you don't have a so you're coming down, and there's the galley is to port right as you come down the steps, and there is a nav station on your right as you come down to starboard, but it is a standing nav station, so it's just kind of alongside, kind of fore and aft oriented, and you're just like standing in the middle of the hallway to do your navigation, and all your instruments and everything are kind of facing into the center line of the boat. And then as you continue
hang on,
forward,
one comment on that nav station. It is a standing nav station. It's hard to see this in the photo you're looking at, but
here we go.
There you go. That's a better photo. It's a standing nav desk, but it's huge for a boat of this size. They clearly prioritized paper charts, because this was in the 80s, paper charts. But it's also built such that the sink, if you're facing the nav station, which means you're facing the starboard side and you're doing your work there, your ass can be leaning up against the bulkhead that forms the sink in the galley, which is similar to how we designed Falcon, having a walkway through the galley where you can support yourself on either side of it. That was the intention here, where you're standing, but you can brace yourself against the sink while you're doing your work at the nav station. This is one of the sort of design things I noticed when I browsed these photos earlier that kind of leads me to believe that this boat actually would be quite practical offshore, because a lot of these little small details like that. I really like that, actually. I think it's unique, and it seems to me quite practical, other than you're not going to be spending hours writing your dissertation there if you're not going to be sitting down. But I do think it's practical.
I agree. I really like this, actually. It's, as you said, you're giving up the seat, but you're getting just an enormous space for this, so you can actually have like your full paper chart out of your whole area. You can't be sitting there for hours, but that's kind of maybe like a good thing. We've all been there sitting at the nav station for just like hours and looking through the same forecast for the 20th time and like considering different routing options. This is kind of this will help you just to make a decision a little faster because you have to stand up to do it, which
That's
which
a fair point.
I like.
I really like on that. I think your mouse just hovered over there for a second. On the side of the coach roof, there's these black squares that look like maybe they just were glued up there with like those kind of whiteboard chalk markers. And the owner, whoever was living on this, looks like that was kind of their logbook. Water filled 11/1/25, holding tank flush 10/30/25, fuel 281 gallons, propane 10/30/25. Like, somebody was keeping track of stuff, which most people don't do, especially if you're living aboard. So that's pretty cool. I actually really like that, and it tells me that this owner did care about, taking care of the boat. And I got to say, the interior with the kind of white headliner and white bulkheads with the teak varnish trim is real classy, classic. I really like that. I think the look is really nice. I just like that style. I also noticed that it doesn't appear to have a headliner, which is like the best thing ever. Ever that you see some backing plates from some hardware on deck. If you've ever taken down a headliner to work on stuff behind it, getting it back up again is a freaking nightmare. So no headliner, if done properly, is a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I really like this. And this large surface for the nav station could be used for, you can stand up here and do like rope work and stuff. There's some what looks to be like some great storage right underneath here with boxes of different things. You can have this little workstation as well. Yeah, I think this is pretty cool, and it's very well because you have your chart plotter, your radio, and things up by like close to the companionway, so you're very easily accessible both from outside, sitting at the companionway, which is, if you're short-handed and you're in high latitudes and bad weather, you're going to be sitting a lot in the companionway just on autopilot and keeping track of things. I think the instruments here are very well placed for use both from the outside and also very accessible from the nav station.
There's a good, we're getting lost. I would spend all our time at the nav station, but the point of this boat is what's the livability of the rest of the boat. If you flip to image 13, August, there's another good, gives you some scale here of maybe that same woman that was at the helm in the galley. And I really like this galley for the same reason I said about the nav station, is once you can tuck yourself in between so first of all, the sink is right in the center line, and that means it's going to drain on both tacks. So to me, this does tell me that this boat was designed for blue water sailing in mind, because they thought about, okay, if we're sailing on either tack, how's the sink going to drain? We did the same thing on Falcon. Falcon's sinks are in the center line, so they drain on both tacks. But you can tuck yourself in there. This is almost a U-shaped galley where if you're standing facing the stove, you'd be facing outboard on the port side. Your butt is against the sink and bracing yourself there. And then you have this sort of entrance by the companionway to the galley. So I do think this is a proper seagoing galley, and it's got quite a lot of counter space aft, kind of under the cockpit seat. There's probably, we didn't really look at this on the outside, but there must be a bridge deck seat in the cockpit where you kind of have to go up and over to get down to the companionway, similar to Eastbjorn, but maybe not as exaggerated, because that gives you then sort of space underneath for countertop space. So for a 35-foot boat of this era, I feel like it's a pretty nice looking galley. So from a livability standpoint, I actually think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Great for I think just moving around and doing stuff down below while short-handed or even single-handed would be great on this boat, because from the galley you can see your chart plotter screen very well. There are ports leading just straight back out into the cockpit, so you'll probably be able to see what the tiller is doing, what the autopilot's doing, how the people in the cockpit are doing. You can see out on both sides through these ports, and while you're cooking, and just full overview of everything that's going on. It's really nice.
Yeah, so let's see here. I'm flipping through some of these. I mean, people don't know how to take photos of boats. If we go to image 5, this appears to be the forward berth. Has to be, because there's no aft bunks. We know that from the cabins there. But again, a clever little dressing seat in there. Instead of having the typical V berth where you have a triangle cutout in the middle, they have what appears to be a double bunk on the port side with this little cutout for a seat to get dressed. And if you've ever gotten dressed at sea, you know that you need a seat to sit down in. Otherwise, you're going to fall on your face. So this again is another little clever design detail. But I really like. I mean, this classic white bulkheads, varnish trim with that sort of seafoam green color on the cushions. That's what Arcturus was, our first boat, and I love that. I love that color combination.
Yeah, it does look really nice.
If you look closely, this is another thing that tells me this is probably a steel boat. You have those kind of slats just above that little seat that are screwed into stringers that provide some separation from the hull side and the kind of trims the interior of that. But again, there's like, you don't even get to see the entire bunk in this picture. So the picture's clearly showing us the seat, but I'd like a wide angle shot of the entire forward cabin there.
Yeah. I don't think my ass would fit in that seat.
If you go to image 7, this is the same forward bunk facing aft. And another hint that this is a steel boat. If you look on the bookshelf outboard, there's some knees there that look rather thin to be fiberglass. It looks like a welded knee that's supporting probably a chain plate there. That's maybe the forward chain plate for the forward shroud, or just stiffening the deck. Unclear.
Could be. Still no inner liner. There's some bolt nuts in the ceiling up here.
We have if you go to image 11, there's a pretty good photo of the port side of the salon, and it's got a nice centerline folding table where the leaves fold up both sides, and it appears that you've got a pretty nice, very similar sort of salon shape to your boat, to Eastbjorn, August, with some nice storage behind. Again, clearly this was a boat that was lived on, because there's some neat little paintings on those cupboard doors and the cushions. It actually looks pretty clean and nice on the inside. I mean, from a livability perspective, this is definitely a one or two person boat. It's quite small down below, but very cozy. I love the vibe. I really like this old school vibe. We didn't talk about, there's a heater in one of these pictures that's designed in a little tiled nook next to the starboard. This looks to be facing forward next to the starboard settee. So that's a nice little built-in touch, clearly built for the Pacific Northwest.
Very, very nice. Yeah, and I agree, definitely made for a short-handed crew. If we're like, with how that nav station is set up, right? Somebody standing there to do their navigation work's going to be very annoying if you have a big crew that's coming up and going down and kind of moving back and forth in that hallway. So, yeah.
So my next two categories here, which tie into the livability, is this boat was built in 1983, we're told. So it's, what is that, 43 years at this point. So it's a long time. So two categories, you can combine them into one. First, what aged the best to you, and what aged the worst from when this boat was built? What design or things have you noticed that what do you think aged the best? What aged the worst?
That's good. That's very good. What aged the best? I guess with this being a like one-off cruising design, you don't have those race rule design features that are meant to kind of work around handicap rules that, some of those just age terribly. This boat was clearly designed from the ground up just to be a self-sufficient, just made to do whatever the owner wanted it to do the best, no matter what the rest of the world thought about that. And so I think, and it still does, definitely. I think this is still a great design for this kind of exploration adventure sailing. So yeah, I think the shape of the boat's still great.
I'll go with that interior color combination. That to me is timeless. Literally does not age. That white bulkheads with the varnish trim and that seafoam green cushions, man, you can't go wrong with that. That's my vote for what aged the best. What aged the worst, August?
Ooh, tough one. What aged the worst?
I have a good answer for this. I'll prime the pump here.
Okay.
Literally, what age the worst might be if it's a steel boat, the actual steel. But we don't
Yeah.
know. We don't know. But that would be my worry of what age the worst. I mean, there's if you look at image number 2 of the woman standing in the cockpit at the helm, it does
Mm,
appear that there's some sort of discoloration on the cockpit locker lids under the cushions, and that to me looks like rust.
mm.
And that's another sign that this might be a steel boat. And that's just one of those big, like, okay, that, the entire question of is this boat a good buy or not depends on did that steel age well or not.
Mm, yeah, very, very true. I think I'll go with the tiller steering and the stern hung rudder. I think,
I like that.
yeah, it's cool, but I mean the boat is so big and it's so heavy. And like we don't know any of this, but I can just imagine that it's going to be a lot of weather helm if you end up in a blow with this, and having to steer with that is going to be very, very uncomfortable and rough on your upper body. So
That's fair.
looks great, but I think practically, which is kind of what this whole boat is about, I think I would prefer a proper balanced rudder with a pedestal and a steering wheel.
What do you think is the next category? What is the best feature of the boat? Maybe that is in the aged well category, but we'll keep it for now. What is the best feature of the boat, August?
I think it's this enormous coffee dispenser at the at the companionway. Definitely, I might steal that. Should we put one of those on Eastbound? Wouldn't that be great?
That's pretty cool. I like that as well. I'm gonna say the best feature. This is a tough one. I'm gonna say that mast mounted spinnaker pole. That's not easy to retrofit. That's a big job, and that's a really, really nice thing to have particularly when you're shorthanded. But at the very least, it just gets the pole off the deck. With that long coach roof on this boat, you're not going to have a lot of room to mount it on deck. It's going to be in the way underfoot, and I think that's the best. That's the best feature in my mind is that mast mounted spinnaker pole.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, biggest red flag. I think I know what you're going to say here. What is the biggest red flag that stands out to you?
Ooh, well, to me, I guess just a lack of information.
Yeah,
Right, like
I guessed you would have said that.
yeah, it's just that we have no idea. Actually, we should bring up a picture of the keel here. I'll go on to the quarterdeck here, and Rachel Bradley is the one who posted this listing for us. So thank you very much for that. And she also managed to dig up this photo. It's a very blurry photo of what she looks like. She's in slings here, and we have I think fairly long fin keel there with a with a skeg, and then of course the stern hung rudder. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it does not actually. This is incidentally does not have that brewer bite like that Jason 35 we showed on Sailboat Data. This is more of a conservative fin keel with a skeg mounted rudder. This is an interesting combo though, with those kind of the externally mounted rudder, but also with a skeg. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. That's interesting. I'm not sure that I like that either, because the beauty of an externally mounted rudder is that it's specifically not. You don't have to mess with anything under the waterline, but this is attached. So I don't know. But anyway, okay. So my biggest red flag is if the boat is steel, that's the red flag. We just don't know what the state of that steel is. And unfortunately, with old boats like this, a lot of times you don't know until you start taking stuff apart, and then you get into some major situations there.
yeah.
Okay. Next category. So just as an aside here, August, this format is quite fun. I'm enjoying this a lot.
Yeah, it's great.
It's taking a lot. I mean, you warned me that at the beginning it might be long. And this next category, we could really, I mean, this could be a whole other hour here, but let's try to keep this short and sweet here. My next category is called Project Creep. If you bought this boat, where does the spending spiral begin?
Yeah. I imagine there might be a lot of rust picking and painting in your future if you buy this. that is a risk for sure.
I am reminded of. I need you to fill some audio here for a second because I got to pull up an email from a guy that talks about project creep, and it's quite funny. So give me fill some time here for a second.
For sure, yeah. I mean, one thing when it comes to projects and refits and stuff like this, these one-off designs leaves you again very alone. One thing is that you don't have access to the information that other owners, what they have done to their boats, and because many designs have like well-known weaknesses and problems that has surfaced through hundreds of boats and hundreds of owners going through and modifying them, so you don't have any of that. And also with boats that are made in the hundreds, these like problems and weaknesses, they arise in the earlier models, and then they can adjust and fix those in the later hulls that they make. And so if there was something else not quite right in this one, you will not only have to kind of discover that for yourself, you'll also have to discover how to fix it and how to manage it yourself, which is can be very problematic.
So on the subject of project creep, let's assume this Brewer Custom is a steel boat. And I'm reminded of a friend of mine I met in Sweden on the West Coast that bought a Challenge 67. That was Che Blythe's sail, kind of competitor to Clipper, but going the wrong way around the world. They built these 67-foot steel boats meant to sail upwind around the world. And they are awesome boats. Talk about a Jeep for the ocean. But they were built out of steel. And he bought this boat, and the way they were built was such that, like I said, they had to like basically unbuild the whole thing just to decide if the boat was seaworthy or not. And Martin and I had been emailing recently because a woman we met in San Francisco, shout out to Melissa if she's listening to this, asked me about a Challenge 67, and I mentioned Martin, and I got them in touch. So Martin sent a nice email back saying, because there's one for sale on the West Coast currently, a Challenge 67. So, and Martin goes on to say, he says, I had built a 43-foot steel yacht with my dad almost from scratch. And when I bought Rimfara, which is the name of his Challenge 67, in 2012, so I thought I knew I was getting into. But when the refit work really started in 2017, I had not really understood the scale of it. I remember talking with Andy and his dad, Dennis, about it at my place. This is actually, we were there because he'd sold us a spinnaker pole that he had somehow came across from a Swan 59 that we bought for Ice Bear. So,
right.
so that's why I was in his driveway with my dad. We were picking it up. Said, I remember talking with Andy and his dad about it in my place, and Dennis said project creep, which is really how it is. Once you have done all of this and all of that, you might as well do that. And then it goes on. We went maybe a bit over what most people would have done by replacing the angle irons floorboard structural frame with stainless. We basically rebuilt the boat from the inside out, changed some steel plating, and for that, or to just inspect, you needed to lift up all 10 tanks and then sandblasted and repainted everything. Rebuild all the paintwork on deck, new non-skid mats, new all electrics, new plumbing, ball valves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, I got a hold of a big stack of mahogany cupboard from Naiad Shipyard, so it's a bit more cozy yacht feeling, but still kept the challenge interior. And he says, would I recommend it to anyone? No way. He said it took them 7 years. They did it themselves. Everything was done with a small group of friends on weekends and holidays. And
Wow.
I mean, I think he shout out to Martin for actually doing it. But that's the kind of thing, we basically did this on Falcon, but the difference on Falcon, it was a solid fiberglass hull and structurally it was perfectly sound. Whereas when you get a steel boat, depending on the steel is easy to fix because it's easy to weld, but like, man, if it's not structurally sound to begin with, you're now rebuilding the structure of the boat before you even get to any of the nicety things. So that's the risk with project creep on this boat in particular.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. We covered this already. Next category: what's missing? Frankly, like everything in the list, meaning in the listing. What's missing in the listing? I think we covered most of that. Okay, August, here's a good scale question. This is next category. Where on the scale of fantasy versus reality would you see this boat, the way it's being portrayed? Do you think if you bought this boat, you'd be basically it would be realistic based on what the listing is, or do you think the listing is a fantasy of what the reality of this boat would actually be?
No, I think it's quite clinical. I think it's presented. It's it feels like a very authentic listing. This would not be my pick for a blue water ocean crossing passage maker, as I feel it's implied in the heading. But it's yeah, great boat.
So I actually do think, just looking at the listing, is this fantasy or reality? I kind of agree with you. I think it's probably on the reality scale, that you probably are getting what the listing is saying you're getting, particularly at that price. I mean, $35,000 is not a lot, and this is a lot of boat for that money, especially when you look at the stuff it comes with, and it's fairly well. It's so hard to say recent. It says new standing rigging 2017. Well, that's not new anymore. This is classic boat listing stuff. New standing rigging 2017. Full batten mainsail. Like, okay, well, that's not new anymore. That's almost 10 years old. Now, this is interesting. New Yanmar diesel in 2015. So that's not that old for a diesel, but it does have 1,200 hours on it. That's pretty low hours.
Yeah. That's pretty nice. Those are great engines too.
So I'd say it's on the reality side of that scale, fantasy or reality. And my
new toilet 2015.
2015, yeah. So just to read between the lines here, new Lavac manual toilet. So what that Lavac is, that's one of those toilets that has a rubber seal in the lid, and you close the lid and you pump vacuum pressure into a chamber underneath the toilet, and then you push a foot pedal and it just sucks it all out. My dad has on Kodiak on his trawler has electric vacuum flush toilets, and when they work, they are awesome. They're like airplane toilets. They're just like a jet engine, just sucks everything out of there. However, when they clog, there is no way to remove any. You can't just pump and kind of force it. You're just screwed. And a couple times it clogged on my dad's boat this winter when I was down there. So.
Oh,
I don't have enough experience with the manual version. My friend that had an Allberg 35 had that. I think they are pretty good, and they're fairly simple. But so that's something I'd have to do a little more research into.
Right.
Okay, second to last category. Who is this boat for? Who should actually buy this boat? What is the market?
Great category. I think I think like a couple. That's a great boat for a couple to do, like, or even like a family boat. Great little family boat to take like a year off and go cruising in this. I think would be fantastic. But yeah, a couple, 2 people actively sailing the boat, I think would be great on this. So if you want to have an adventure year, or if you're retired and want to get out there, do some sailing, I think that would be wonderful. And I mean, it's definitely like kind of cozy exploration, just like sailing the day, anchor at night in some cove, and fire up that nice barbecue on the back, and It's a great kind of exploring coasts boat. I think, if you want to kind of do a circumnavigation and be all kind of high seas hero, I don't think this is the one that I would get. I
high seas hero.
I don't think the actual sailing part of this boat would be that enjoyable. I think downwind, I think it could be a lot of fun, because you have that spinnaker pole, you have the jib boom, which is really fun.
It comes with a very nice looking kite as well in the photos. It does. Beautiful, colorful spinnaker on there, which is cool.
Yeah, so a downwind, it's going to be fantastic. I mean, but which boat is not fun to sail downwind? Yeah. Right? But I think just like with this big arc and the bimini and all this stuff in the cockpit and the tiller, I think like any other point of sail than downwind, I think just like not going to be that enjoyable. So I think this will. I would, if I wanted to just like slowly explore some high latitudes coastline, and to stay on anchor until the wind was behind me, and then go to a new place and explore. That's what I would do with this boat.
Yeah, I agree. I think bringing this full circle, it was Rachel on the Quarterdeck who posted this. The little bit I know of Rachel, I think this actually might be a very good boat for Rachel. That steel being the biggest caveat there. I just don't know what the condition of that is. But, when you're talking about coastal cruising and stuff, like the stakes are lower. So if the steel's not perfect, well, does it matter? At that price point as well, like buy the boat. You also probably have some bargaining power in the price here because it is a one-off. There's not going to be a big market for it. But I think if it's not for Rachel specifically, I think this is definitely a boat for either end of the spectrum, either a young person or a young couple that doesn't have kids and doesn't have a ton of money but has a lot of enthusiasm and wants to learn and do things by themselves. I think it's perfect for that. Or at the other end of that spectrum, somebody that's, the kids are out of the house, they're retired, and they want a cool boat to kind of just cruise around on that's not going to cost a lot of money if they don't go overboard and fall into that project creep hole. Because I do believe this boat could be perfect without doing anything to it to just cruise around in a low stakes, kind of close to shore, like you said, coastal. I'm not sure you'd have to do anything to this boat, particularly because it's been lived on for a long time. And boats that are used a lot actually tend to be better maintained than boats that sit at the dock with nobody around. So I think this boat is perfect for somebody on a budget that's got enthusiasm and either some hands-on skill or at least the desire to learn that kind of stuff, and wants a boat that they can kind of have some real serious adventures on without it costing a ton. Now, I always say there's no such thing as a cheap boat, but you just got to be careful with, what do you actually need to change before you enjoy this boat? And I think you could at least take this boat out for a year or two and not do anything to it and enjoy it.
Probably. Yeah, I agree with that.
Last question to wrap up our first reboot of the boat shopping. August, would you buy this boat?
Yes, I would.
I also think I would buy this boat. I'm actually kind of talking myself into it as we're going through this. I like this a lot more than I did when I first looked at the listing that Rachel sent there. So yeah, so 2 for 2. We would buy this boat. There you go, Rachel. You have our stamp of approval.
Go for it. Yeah. Fantastic.
Cool. Well, August, this was great. Let's keep this going. I like this format. I think this is fun. Let's see how we do it on the next one. We have our next boat that we're going to do is kind of at the opposite end of this spectrum. It's going to be a CNC 44, which was, like you said, the reddest boat you've ever seen. I'll leave you with that. And for those of you listening on the podcast, that'll be next week's or some future episode. And those of you that are watching live, we'll be back in. Give me 15 minutes here, August, to regroup. We'll start at 10:30 if that's good with you.
That sounds good. I will make a little kind of intermission picture here that we can put up, and then we can go and make
from The Simpsons. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and have ourselves a snack.
Great. Got some more coffee. Ready to go?
Yeah, I don't drink coffee anymore, but I reloaded my water from my BOC channel.
Very nice.
Oh, hang on a minute. I've got the YouTube thing rolling in the other window here, and I'm hearing myself now. Okay, nice. Close. All right. Okay, so for those of you listening on the podcast, this is another week, another episode. But for those of you listening live, or for you, August, we are back after a 10-minute break, having just reviewed the Custom Brewer 35. Now we are on to our next sailboat review, and we are gonna boat shopping thing. We're gonna I tweaked the format ever so slightly, August. So some of these categories are gonna be in a different order than they were the last episode, but I think that worked quite well, and I had a great time. So are you ready for round 2?
I am very ready. Absolutely. This is great.
I can't
fun.
believe that. This is basically what you and I and me and my dad, and I've done this for years, and now that I'm doing it, quote unquote, for my career is quite exciting.
Isn't that nuts? Yeah. Talk about boats at work. It's wonderful. So
it's the best. It's the best. Okay, so you had actually. So for those of you that are just joining us now, the gist of this is we do a boat shopping thing. people on the Quarterdeck, members on the Quarterdeck, post listings that they're interested either in seriously buying or just want to hear our take on it. And we go through and pick which ones we're most interested in talking about. You picked the episode we just did, the Brewer 35, and I picked this one, although I think this was a mutual, I think both were mutual choices, but I am choosing a CNC 44 from, let's see, where did I find it here? This is a 1985 CNC 44 that was submitted by Brian on the Quarterdeck. For context, Brian and I sailed together multiple times with 59 North. Most recently, he came to Sweden to sail on Spica, the old Spica, the Norlene 34, in the Gotland Runt race 2 years ago, the one that we had to crash out of because the boat was filling with water. And Brian, I know, sails in the Midwest, I think on the Great Lakes, I want to say, somewhere out there, and does a lot of club racing and stuff like that. So the CNC 44 is a much more higher performance boat than the Brewer that we just did. So that's the context with this. And I will start by just giving you kind of the gist of the listing here. It says this, and this is actually listed with a broker. This is 1985 CNC 44 listed for $99,000. This is a one-of-a-kind freshwater CNC 44. If you want to race competitively or cruise in comfort, this boat is all caps set up. Now, we have a section that's going to come later in this episode than it did in the first one called Broker BS, where we're going to try to read between the lines of some of the things that they're trying to sell you in the listing. But first, a little bit about the design. As I was researching this, August, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but you'll often see listings for a Baltic/CNC. Have you ever come across this?
No.
Because I know you had a Baltic 37, right?
I did, yes.
So interestingly, I don't. CNCs are pretty ubiquitous in the U.S. where I'm from, like on the Chesapeake. You see them all the time, but I didn't know that much about them until I did some research for this episode. And I do recall seeing like a listing now and then where it says Baltic/CNC, whatever. And it turns out that basically they had a deal similar to how your Swan 48 sometimes was marketed as a Palmer Johnson 48. They're basically Baltic would buy the designs from CNC and build the same boat, but to a higher fit and finish quality than CNC made them.
Right.
So
interesting. I always thought they looked very similar. And,
and they literally look identical in some of the designs because it was the exact same design, just built in Finland versus built in, initially Canada and then Rhode Island. So a little bit of background on the CNC in general. This is one of the ones I mentioned in the Brewer episode that it's cool to have a pedigreed designer and do a search by designer. And it never occurred to me who designs the CNC 44s. Well, it turns out CNC stood for Cuthbertson and Cassian, both with the first name George. So they were these two guys, the two founders of CNC, who had a design office. They were engineers and designers, and basically they are also the designers. So the CNC had an in-house design team of George and George. Now, this is a little bit half-assed internet research, so I didn't fact-check that, but sounds good. And I noticed, you talk about like Swan as another example. Swans have been designed by S&S, by German Freers most recently. Same Hallberg Rassies have different designers, but CNC are CNC design, which I found interesting. But again, there's not much like, I mean, the CNC is a well-known name, but like that's kind of like meh for me. I like having a name behind stuff, so that's maybe not I don't know if it's a negative. It's just I think it's cool to have a designer, a known designer attached to the name, but I guess CNC itself is the known designer.
They must have had, there's probably several designers then, right? And it's kind of in-house.
I guess so. Yeah, I'm sure. All design offices are like that. It's not, you see a Bruce Farr design, like Falcon's a Farr 65. Well, it wasn't necessarily Bruce that designed the entire boat. It was his team at the Farr design office. So that's fair. So CNCs were basically sort of your classic performance cruiser. And this one is from the mid-'80s, which was like smack in the height of the IOR era. And like the IOR era was known for producing very beamy boats that were somewhat unwieldy to sail hard downwind. I mean, right here in the opening picture, if you're watching this video, you can just see the extreme beam at the waterline of this boat. The boat is heeled over hard, and there's guys hiked out on the rail, but you can just see it's like a very bulbous boat with pinched bow and a pinched stern, and that was kind of the classic IOR shape of that era. And I got to say, on a boat that's this big, I mean, it's 44 feet, it's longer. It looks better when it's longer. When you see this same sort of design philosophy applied to like a 30 or 35 footer, they really look like a watermelon seed.
Yeah, that's true. Very droplet shaped.
And you said, August, this was the reddest boat you've ever seen. So for those listening to the podcast, please describe what you mean by that.
It is, well, I mean, everything is red. The hull is red, the mast is red, they've painted the spreaders red, the boom is red, and there are several photos here that I think span quite a long time because they're altered. The boat is changing throughout, and there's a spinnaker pole which is red. And then we have there's a radar mast that has been added, which is also red. And then there is a bowsprit that's been added too that pops up along the lines here, which is also painted red.
Retractable bowsprit,
retractable,
like you see on a J80.
That's right. So very, very, very committed to the color scheme here, and I guess red probably makes it go faster. Is that right?
I mean, it looks like it's going faster. I can tell you that much. I mean, you can't beat a red boat. I mean, Tessier had it right back in the day. His famous Catch Joshua was bright red. I don't think the masts were red, but man, it is hard to beat a bright red boat is hard to beat. They just stand out, and man, they make even uncool boats look cool, and they make cool boats look really cool.
Yeah. That is very. I mean, especially on like what is now a pretty like retro design. I think it looks fantastic.
It looks awesome. So, so a little more on CNC, some background of CNC. They're, like I said, pretty ubiquitous. They were a big time production boat back in the day, built in Rhode Island. You don't see a lot of boats built in the U.S. anymore. Now this is going to come up as one of my red flags later in the categories, but they were built to be performance racer cruisers, which means they were kind of optimized for lighter weight, which means they have a ton of balsa in them. And after my experience with the Norleen 34, I swore I'd never buy another boat that had any balsa anywhere in it, because especially on older boats, if you introduce water into balsa core of hull or deck, and it's just a nightmare. So these boats, when they were new, that balsa created a very stiff structure. So that the hulls, most of the CNC hulls were balsa cord hull down to the waterline, then solid fiberglass under the waterline, and a balsa cord deck. And our Norleen 34 was exactly like that. And it creates a very stiff structure for the deck and the hull, which is, again, a little more performance-oriented, and a lighter structure. But God forbid you break that fiberglass seal and put water in there. Balsa is very good at migrating the water to the rest of the entire structure, and you just end up with basically mushy mush when you get water in there. Ask our friend Lee, who used to produce the podcast. He had a Tiana 37 with balsa cord decks, and he replaced all that himself. And we're going to get to the episode on we're going to get to the category called Project Creep, and that's going to come back around. So but that was a sort of one of the characteristics of CNC boats, how they were built. So fiberglass, most of them were balsa cord. This one the CNC 44 had a bolted on lead keel, and that lead keel was bolted into a fiberglass grid construction in the bottom of the boat. So that's a good thing. Just like Falcon was built, solid fiberglass grid structure that took the keel loads, as opposed to sort of your modern production boats that have a glued in grid structure, which is not nearly as structurally strong. So all things being equal, if the boat's in good structural condition, it was they built good quality boats, I would say. CNCs have a pretty good reputation, but that balsa thing is a big red flag, which we'll come back to. I mean, on that note, August, what do you notice? I mean, are you familiar with CNCs? Do you have any opinion on them? I mean, I think they're more common where I'm from than where you're from.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of them here. But I mean, they're there's a lot of them around, right? I've don't think I've ever sailed on one myself, but they do look very similar to my old Baltic, which I love dearly, and for the most part, I like those old IOR designs. I think they're quite neat. So yeah, no, I like what I'm seeing.
I also think that saying a boat was from the IOR era is kind of like a bad word nowadays, because like the Fastnet disaster in '79 blamed a lot of that on the instability of the boat. I actually think that's kind of crap, because especially in the context that we're talking about this here, where we're talking about boats primarily used for cruising. That's kind of our wheelhouse. And the IOR boats were notoriously difficult to handle downwind, but only if you're flying a kite in heavy weather. And like we're not going to be doing that. Even Eastbjorn is an early era IOR. When we talk about that, actually, we should kind of provide some context here. IOR was a racing rule that a lot of designers built or designed boats, not necessarily trying to optimize the boat to go fast, but to actually try to make the boat slow under the rule, so it got a better handicap, so that it would perform better against a racing fleet. So the incentives of designing boats around racing rules are completely backwards. And as an interesting little aside in history, Cal 40 became an all-time famous racing boat back in the 60s, because they basically, the guy that designed the Cal 40, oh man, this name is escaping me now. Oh, come on. This is terrible of me. This is blasphemous. Please help me out here. Look this up while I'm telling this story.
Will do.
But basically, he said, and this was back in the there was a different racing rule, the pre-IOR rule. I also forget what that was called. But basically, he said, forget the rule. I'm just going to design the fastest boat. And it's going to be so fast that it's still going to win on handicap. And it did. And it was famous. And it was a very, very good balanced, good performing sailing boat. So you get these IOR boats. They have a reputation for designing around the rule, not designing a good boat. And sometimes that goes wrong. But really, that only goes wrong if you're pushing it hard in a racing context. Now, knowing Brian and knowing
Bill
that,
Lapworth.
Thank you, Bill Lapworth. Thank you,
yes.
August. So anyway, in the context of what Brian might be looking for this boat at, if he's looking to race it, then that might be a consideration, that these IOR boats are notoriously hard to handle in heavy weather downwind, partly also because they fly a symmetric kite, so they get that kind of death roll thing going on. This boat's been modified with the bowsprit. We'll come back to all that. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about these racing rule situations. Okay, August, any more background on the CNC in general before we get into the categories?
Not for me. No, I think that's great.
All right, we're going to flip the order around a little bit, and I think we'll start with the first category. We're going to call this the design DNA. So this is where I want to look at some of the numbers of the boat and talk about how those numbers translate into actual performance. So August, if you want to do us a favor here, and for the audio listeners, read some of the numbers off the listing, and then I've got some more numbers for us from Sailboat Data.
Very nice, sure, yes. So we got a 44-foot length, as mentioned. Waterline length of 35 feet 4 inches. Max draft is 8 feet 4 inches. Beam is 13 feet 3 inches. Bridge clearance is a good one, 63 feet 3 inches.
I'm delighted to see that. Most listings don't include, that's otherwise known as air draft. So how high is the mast off the water?
Yeah, that is nice. It's, sometimes you get the length of the actual mast, but that doesn't tell you the whole picture.
Yep.
So we got a displacement of 20,906 pounds, and a max speed that's listed here of 7.96. Very specific numbers here.
That's of course the formula that takes the waterline length, and being that it's a displacement hull, gives you what you should actually expect to be the theoretical max boat speed.
The hull speed, yeah. And yeah, that's probably it from the listing here, I would think.
So a couple comments on that. This is clearly a high performance boat, a draft of 8 feet 4 inches on a 44-foot boat. Proportionally, that's deeper than Eastbjorn, and probably deeper than, well, much deeper proportionally than Falcon. I mean, Falcon's 65 feet overall and only has a draft of 10 feet. So this is a, optimized for performance. Also, that air draft, 63-foot mast on a 44-foot boat. That is towering.
That is really cool. That's a kind of good, if you're wondering how performance-based a boat is, if you just take the length of the boat, kind of divided by the height of the mast, that's a pretty good indication of how fast this thing's going to go.
Well, that's at least what the designer had in mind. Like, okay, I'm going to put a giant mast on this and make it go fast. So if we go to Sailboat Data, which is one of my all-time favorite websites, we're going to take those numbers and put them in a little bit more context. So when you take a displacement of 20,000 pounds, for example, and you take the sail area of 924 square feet, that is usually referring to the sail area of the white sails, so not including any spinnakers. And typically, again, some designers and some brochures will give you like the maximum sail area with the largest Genoa. Sometimes that's like overlapping, but to compare apples to apples, you should try to find sail area that is using the 4-triangle area, not the area of the largest jib. That gives you more realistic numbers here. So anyway, sail area of 924 feet. We don't know what that's referring to, but I think Sailboat Data usually uses the baseline of the 4-triangle area. So if we do some calculations down here, the sail area to displacement, this is a ratio of how much sail versus how much the boat weighs. This is 19.5. So for a boat from the 80s, that is quite high. For comparison's sake, I think Eastbjorn is around 15 and a half or 16.
I think she's just 16, yeah.
16. Falcon, I think, is like 20 or 21. So that is up there. That is up there. Ballast to displacement, this is again is the ratio of how much weight is in the keel versus the weight overall of the boat. So 47%, that means 47% of the displacement is all in the keel. So that's going to make for a quite stiff boat, as well as the fact that it's quite beamy. Displacement to length, so this is the weight versus the waterline length. That's 213. If you recall from the Brewer episode, that was over 300 something. So this is much, much lighter, but still not what they call the ultra light displacement boats, the sleds from California. They were like under 100 on that number.
Oh, jeez.
So it's still a moderate boat in terms of what that number means in context. There's your Brewer comfort ratio of 27. So my guess is that the lower the number, the less comfortable, given that Brewer 35 had a number of 35, I believe.
That is true. The lower the less comfort. That's right. And,
you don't always see this, but the next number down here is the S number, and that was basically a measure of excitement. That was like the excitement factor. So like the higher the number, the more exciting the boat is to sail. And this is getting up there close to 3, which is most of the boats that we sail on, I think, are down in the 1s. This is 2.8. So that tells you that this is going to be a lively boat to sail.
How is that? Do you know how that's calculated? That's interesting. I never heard about that before.
You could look it up while I talk.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, I had never heard of that before either until I was doing some research on our Norleen 34 and came across that. I thought that was quite cool. And then you've got the sort of rig and sail particulars at the bottom here. The I, J, P, and E, these are measures of the rig dimensions. Gives you the foresail area, the mainsail area, sail area total. And this is here, it says the 100% fore triangle and main triangles. That's the 923 feet. So I really like looking at this sailboat data to get an idea of what the boat is going to perform like. And I think of all these numbers we talked about, the most important number of all is the sail area to displacement. That's the best way to compare the performance from one boat to another. So this tells me right off the bat that this is going to be a pretty fast, good boat in light air, but also one that you might need to reef early in a cruising context. And I can tell you from experience, Falcon being at 21, we're almost always sailing with 1 or 2 reefs in the main if the wind's over 12 or 15 knots. Did you find a definition for the S number, August?
I did. So it is a number projecting a boat's speed potential based on a 1 to 10 scale, combines displacement to length ratio and sail area to displacement to classify boats ranging from lead sled cruisers probably, to racing machines. Right. So I mean, yeah, it's and the formula is it's a very long weird formula.
But
But
it's
yeah,
basically combining that. What did you say? The displacement to length and sail area to displacement.
that's right.
That's good because I think the displacement to length ratio can be misleading sometimes because some boats that were, these old boats that had long overhangs, they have a very high displacement to length ratio because the length they're taking is the waterline length. But when the boat is actually sailing, it's extending its waterline. So you see this huge number, like Arcturus, our first boat, had displacement to length of like 350 or something. But it was a good sailing boat because it was always sailed heeled over, and now you're immersing more of the waterline, and you're actually dynamically changing those numbers. These numbers are all static numbers. So you got to kind of, there is a trick to reading between the lines here, which is kind of the whole point of doing these episodes. So, but I would say that and here's a fact check right off the bat. The Sailboat Data says the designer of this boat was Rob Ball. So that might have been the internet lying to me earlier. Now I also don't know who Rob Ball is. Maybe he worked for CNC, but there you go.
There we go. There is a that rings a bell actually. But yeah, cool.
So we're gonna have to fact check that. But anyway, so I would say if we bring this full circle back to this category, the design DNA, I think it's quite clear that this boat was built to do both racing and cruising, and I think the numbers back that up. And I would say that the numbers actually put this on the scale of it's probably going to be a very fun, fast boat to sail.
Yes, I would agree. This looks like a great sailing boat.
Okay, let's see. Where was my next category here? I rearranged this on my sheet. Now I'm scrolling all around my page here. Okay, dock walk. This is the fun part here. Let's get into our first impressions here, just looking at the pictures, August. So when you scroll through the photos of this listing, what are the first things that stand out to you besides the color red as you browse the boat here?
Well, it's yeah, of course you're not gonna miss this at the dock. It's got this kind of intense like burgundy red, just like screaming at you, like so saturated. It's wonderful. But yeah, no, very very red. I think also just the height of the mast is gonna be one of the first things that you'll notice here, and then it's just a classic IOR boat. And reminds me very much of my old Baltic 37. I think that would be kind of my first thoughts that would enter my head as I gazed upon this.
Yeah, a couple small details that you might not notice at first glance. If you look at the picture you're showing there now, you can see there's like a hole in the starboard side of the transom. That hole, and this is again back to what was the purpose of the boat. The boat was designed as a racing boat that could also cruise. That hole was to stow the man overboard pole. You'd slide it in that hole, and then you'd yank it out if somebody went overboard. And you can actually see the pole sticking out in one of the other photos. The photo you had up before with the guys on the foredeck with the kite, you can see that pole sticking out of that hole just underneath the horseshoe buoy there. If you go to, it's like the second picture.
Interesting. There we go.
Huh. So if you see boats with a hole in the transom, that's what that hole is for. It's designed to stow the man overboard pole.
And it's connected to the horseshoe buoy. You throw the horseshoe buoy overboard, and then the drag pulls the pole out. Oh, that is neat. I like that.
Another thing, like you said, the classic IOR, it's basically got that very wide transom that really slopes, kind of matches the angle of the bow. The Ice Bear had that same sort of look, that big transom on the back.
Yeah.
I'm noticing, let's see here. I'm noticing in some of the pictures here on deck, all the lines lead back to the cockpit. We have no teak on deck, which I'm always noticing that as a good sign. I noticed the tow rail. It has an aluminum tow rail, which I very much appreciate. I love a boat with an aluminum tow rail, just like East Bjorn. You can attach stuff to it. It's got, this is interesting, actually. It has very inboard shrouds and even further inboard Genoa tracks that go way back to the cockpit. Normally when you see shrouds, chain plates set so far inboard, almost always the track is outboard of those shrouds. In this case, it's inboard. So they're both going to be flying kind of small like a staysail or a small jib that goes to the forward part of that track inside the shrouds, but also it's going to allow you to get really tight sheeting angles on your Genoa that overlaps the shrouds because of how far aft that track goes and how far inboard it is. It's butted up against the cabin sides, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
that's true. That's a good, like, if you're just kind of trying to judge boat sailing characteristics just by looking at it like this, having the tracks that far inboard is telling you that this is a very weatherly boat. It's
Yeah.
going to be, because like the fact that the boat, that there is even a point to putting the tracks that far inward means that the boat can actually sail with the sheeting point that far inboard, which is very, very impressive.
That calls back to the design, like the keel and the rudder. You can't, if you put these tracks and this chain plate arrangement on that brewer we talked about last episode, you ain't going to sail upwind at those angles because the hull shape just won't do it. Whereas this boat with that 8.5-foot draft, deep draft, tall rig, it's skinny hull shape, lighter weight. It's going to be able to sail tighter angles, and that's a good point. I also note on this same picture. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, there's just, if you have like full keel double ender classic boats, will have like the Genoa track like all the way out in line with the tow rail
On the rail, yeah.
Because it's like with the full keel, there's no point. It's like moving the sheeting point further inboard. There's no point because the boat won't be able to point high enough to make that effective anyway.
Couple other things I noticed in this picture. They even have red tape on the turnbuckles.
Oh yeah, look at that.
But on those turnbuckles, the reason I bring those up is that this mast is the classic 80s tall, skinny, bendy rig, and all three shrouds attach at the same point. And you'll also notice in that first photo of the boat heeled over sailing, it's hard to see, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've got the backstay on the back, and you've got runners that split into a check stay and a runner on the mast to stabilize that bendy mast fore and aft, because all of the shrouds are in line with the mast. You have inline spreaders, inline shrouds, and then you've got runners and check stays leading to one point there on the windward rail. And that is the same way Ice Bear was set up. All boats from this era were set up that way. There's a great book called Blue Water Racing that talks all about different rig types and how to tune them for sailing. The point of this was this mast was very shapeable. You could bend it to make it whatever shape you wanted to affect the mainsail shape, but it requires a lot of lines on it. So you have not just runners, but check stays, and they always have to be on because that mast is going to be a noodle without them. And it makes the boat more complicated to sail. Anybody that's sailed on Ice Bear with us will know that we're always messing around with the runners. I believe, August, you were on board with me on Ice Bear when the deck fitting failed on that runner on the windward side that one time, and it pinged off.
That's right.
Yeah,
Pull the fitting right out of the deck. That's
so these,
or like the stainless fitting broke off, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the,
These inline spreader rigs are more difficult to sail than the modern swept-back spreaders, or even a rig like Eastbjorn's that has split lower shrouds, where at least you have a chain plate fore and aft to take some of that load. And also, right off the bat, I know that even though this is a 44-foot boat, it's got 3 spreaders on the rig, and 3 spreaders. What all that spreaders do is stabilize the center, basically stabilize the tube of the mast in between unsupported sections. So oftentimes you'll see on heavy cruising boats, even if it's a tall mast, maybe it only has 1 spreader, because the section of that mast, the diameter of the tube, is fat enough that it doesn't need support. So the more spreaders, the skinnier the tube, the more support it needs. And therefore, there's more complication, more complexity in the rig, more things to go wrong, more shrouds, more pieces of rigging, more fittings. So that's not bad. It's just explaining what that means. I said at the break we were going to go faster through these dock walk sections. There's so much to talk about here, though. It's hard to do that.
That's true. I gotta mention just quickly before we move on, this Dodger, which is very interesting. It's a tiny, completely zipped up Dodger. It's almost like a dome. You can sit here and just like look out, and doesn't offer any protection at all for the crew in the cockpit. It's just there's a very high bridge deck, and you just kind of look into this tiny, tiny kids' play tent thing, which is of course bright red as well. Before you go down below, it's a very distinctive look, I would say.
So this is a great angle to emphasize that this boat was clearly designed for sailing first, living aboard second. I mean, it's going to be a pain in the ass to climb over that bridge deck to go up and down below. Like you say, you have no protection behind the Dodger. You have a lot of winches. I can see 8 winches in this one photo alone, which means you've got great controls for everything where you need them, but it's stuff in the way when you're trying to sit and have your cocktails and crudités at the end of the day. You've got a traveler in the cockpit. Now, frankly, this is like up my alley. I like this. I like having a boat that's designed to sail first, and I'd rather compromise on the live aboard ergonomics before compromising on the sailing system. So this is speaking my language, but it is very obvious what this boat was designed for when you see this cockpit layout.
Totally.
Okay, let's see what else stands out. That's basically the on deck stuff. I see a teak handrail. I don't love that, and also the varnish is peeling off of it. But other than that, there's not really any wood on deck. There's a little bit of teak in the cockpit.
There's a CQR anchor. I don't love that.
Yeah, so he's got an old school. Like you can tell though, this boat probably doesn't spend a ton of time at anchor. I do like
True.
though the the recessed windlass under the deck fitting there. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's nice. That is nice.
It does. The fact that it has a windlass tells you at least it is a cruising boat. It's not just a racing boat.
Although in a lot of the older pictures, I guess there's probably used to be more racing, and then it's added these kind of creature comfort cruising things after a while. But
go back to that last picture of the foredeck with the windlass thing. This is an interesting thing that you might not notice at first glance. Look at the fitting on deck just aft of the windlass. There is a double folding pad eye fitting there with what appears to be a 2-to-1 halyard kind of snapped down to it. My guess is that is a deck fitting for a staysail, an inner forestaysail. And what that 2-to-1 halyard is, it could be one of two things. It's either to fly like a Code Zero or something on the bowsprit, and that's just where they have it stowed, or it could be a staysail that is on a luff line roller furler, and you use the 2-to-1 halyard to get tension in the stay. So basically, there would be no structural stay. The stay itself is in the luff of the sail, and you use a 2-to-1 halyard to get, and that's also got a swivel on it to get the tension you need in the luff of that sail. A lot of the it's basically kind of similar to how the Vendée Globe boats do their sort of inner stays, so you can have a furler on there, but you can also take it away. If that's what it is, that's pretty neat. That's pretty high tech. I like that.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. If indeed that's what it is, but I'm sure that fitting is a tack fitting for a inner forestay fitting. That's the same fitting we used on my dad's boat.
Eastbeyond has the same one too, actually.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say something else here. I guess what I should say here is we haven't really looked at the listing yet, and I ordered these categories like this on purpose because I believe that it's kind of like the way I look at a weather forecast before I read WRI's forecast. I like to create my own first impressions before I read the listing, and that gives me a better sense of what is bullshit in the listing or not. If I already have some kind of preconceived ideas from just looking at the photos, it might help me read between the lines a little bit when I actually go back and compare it to the listing. So this is on purpose that we haven't looked at the listing yet.
Very cool. Very cool, yeah. Although it's important to also remember that the pictures are not objective. The owner chose what to take pictures of, what to exclude, and how to frame everything. But yes, no, you're absolutely right. That's a good way of doing it.
Let's move along to the next category. This is along the same lines. Let's move to the inside of the boat and make some impressions on what would it be like to live aboard this boat as opposed to sail this boat. So let's move inside, August. What do you think about the interior arrangement of this boat? What do we see in this picture?
Well, we're kind of looking at a picture here from the companionway. So we're coming down, and we see the nav station straight to port as you come down. And it's a great little nav station with a seat, tons of instruments all over the bulkhead there, and a big, nice chart table. And then it's quite open. There's not like a semi bulkhead kind of separating the salon from the galley in the nav station. It's a quite open, nice salon without a table, mind you. So there's no table there. You just have the mast coming through the salon there. The galley is on the starboard side. You got the kind of sink in the middle, and then the rest of the galley on the starboard side. And then you have the heads, I believe, is just directly behind the nav station. And then there's a little hallway back on the starboard side where you enter the aft cabin. I think this is a great layout, and again, identical to the Baltic 37 that I had.
Interesting. Go back to that main. There you go. The main cabin layout. This is interesting because you don't. This I agree with you on the layout. First of all, but again, there's some signs here that this boat was built for sailing first, living on second. I wonder if it had a table that they just removed for racing, because that's a big thing that's missing for cruising. But notice that it looks like the mast is like right in the center of the salon, and that's kind of an optical illusion because typically you see a keel step mast is right up against a bulkhead, dividing the sort of the salon from the forward part of the boat. But that bulkhead is a good 4 feet forward of that mast, and the whole interior the mast is not actually in the middle of the boat. The mast would be still in that sort of mid forward position like you'd normally see it. It's just that that main bulkhead is pushed way forward to give a bigger salon and more area in the back of the boat. Basically, the galley and the nav station here appears to be at the widest part of the boat, which is typically reserved for the salon. And you've got pilot bunks on either side outboard, and you can see those vertical blue columns are actually the chain plates padded because you're sleeping right next to them that are transferring the load from the rig down into the stringers inside the hull. And again, you've got 4 quite good sea bunks in this main salon area if you had lee boards or lee cloths attached to them. Although on the pilot bunks, you might the chain plates themselves might act as a pretty good lee board. But I just wanted to call that out, that bulkhead, it looks like the boat's bigger than it is because my guess is that forward cabin is much, much smaller and there's probably not a head there, which is good. You don't want the head in the forward part of the boat. You want the head aft. So I agree. I think this is a unique layout, but I also quite like it.
But yeah, that's a good point about you can see the chain plates here. That's another consequence of making a boat this weatherly is that, and then having to move the chain plates further inboard is that they start to mess up with the interior of the boat as well.
There's not a lot of storage in here though. A lot of sleeping places for people, but like what you gain when those 2 pilot bunks, normally on a cruising boat, those would be cabinets or bookshelves or something. And that's a ton of volume that you're losing in storage because of having those bunks there. So that's, again, clearly on this boat was meant for racing, not cruising is the priority.
Absolutely. Let's see. So we got a nice, I mean, this is a big, nice galley. Tons of storage there. That's really neat.
Huge galley, yeah. For a 44-footer, that's a huge galley. I do like, you're looking aft now. You do have a little bit of space to kind of lean on either tack, where you're leaning against the companionway steps, and then you've got counter space opposite of that. But as you know on Eastbjorn, when you're at that stove, if that stove in this picture is on the high side of the boat, if you're on starboard tack, it's a long way down to the nav station. And if you're not strapped in or holding on, I mean, August, you can probably tell some war stories about that. And I think that's kind of a negative in that sense.
Yeah, no, true. It's there's a lot of space here to fall around. That is true. So if we get here, we can see those pilot birds. They look really small. The pilot birds here, you got to put the smallest crew into those for sure.
Well, they're because they're angled towards the front of the boat. They bend in quite a lot, so you're not gonna have a lot of room for your feet. They're wider at your shoulders if your head is aft. So they're probably pretty cozy sea bunks. And there you go. This is a much tinier V-berth than you'd normally see on a 44-foot cruising boat.
Yeah. They have, there's not a big kind of chain locker here. We can kind of just see where the that compartment where the windlass is sitting right at the bow here. And then in that
photo, you can see the back. So this is the the chain plate for that deck fitting that I was talking about for the staysail. You can see there's a little bulkhead there with a huge plate mounted to it. So that's a nice big backing plate for that inner forestay fitting.
There we go. And the bright red retractable bowsprit comes into this space as well. There we go. Look at that. Hell of a project. You know, we discussed doing that on Eastbeyond. And a good friend of mine actually just did on his Swan 52. And yeah, no, it's huge, massive project. There's just so much load on those things. And you gotta make sure you do that properly. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly, you know, it's been made to race. Here we can see the aft cabin, which actually has one big bunk in the center, kind of an owner's cabin type, which doesn't look to be a great sea bunk. It's in the middle, and there's a lot of space to bounce around.
I've never quite seen a layout like this. I like the concept, but they kind of ruined it. Like, you could easily put a lee board in the center of that. There's two different cushions making up this double, but there's nothing on the sides. Like, the whole point of having a nice sea bunk aft is to be able to lean on the sides, but you're going to literally, like, they tried to do like a modern island queen style bunk, but it's not big enough cabin for that. And they lost the beauty of the sea bunks. Although if you put a lee board in the middle, you could always sleep on the high side, but then you're only getting one bunk back there. So I like the concept of the under cockpit cabin, but I don't love the execution.
This was I thought I'm checking Sailboat data now to see the original drawings. And this is actually how it was meant to be. I thought maybe this has been retrofitted, but no, that's how it is.
I mean, generally speaking, this is a kind of a pretty basic interior. It's kind of got a lot of white plastic and a little bit of teak, varnished teak on some of the wood. It's probably nicer fit. It looks like your standard Beneteau or Bavaria, but maybe a little bit nicer from the 80s. Maybe it was a little warmer and nicer, but it basically has a lot of that plasticky production boat feel to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just to try to describe this visually. That's what you're looking at. You got a lot of white plastic in places, but it looks reasonably classy.
Yeah, I like it. I think it looks good. Got a foot pump there in the galley, and that's the last
So what
picture.
do you think, in general, what do you think this boat would be like if you're going to sort of live aboard cruise on this boat? What's the vibe?
I think this would be great. I think this would be wonderful. It's I kind of tried this out on the Baltic 37, which is quite a bit smaller, but otherwise very similar layout, and I think it's great. I think for a kind of cruising lifestyle with longer passages where you want to spend a lot of time actually being out in the ocean, this is going to be great. This is going to be very nice to sail on, very fun, and I think the interior works really well.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, this is right up my alley. I always prefer performance first, comfort second, and I think this does a lot on the comfort side. I think I'd probably, we had basically a smaller version of this layout on the old Spica, under cockpit double pilot bunks, and yet you end up using those pilot bunks for just storage, and it's not the tidiest storage because you can see everything, but if you really wanted to, you could retrofit some cabinets in there and build some really nice storage in there if you wanted to. But you can also use duffel bags and shove them up on the pilot bunks there. So I agree. I think this would be I think you would have a lot of fun sailing this boat, and I think you might find some things annoying living aboard. But I will always take that trade off.
100%, yes.
Okay. We made our first impressions just looking at the photos. Now, this is the section I moved from the top of last episode. Now, let's go to the category that I like to call broker BS. What is the broker trying to sell us, and how much truth is there in that sales pitch? So we'll go back to the listing, and we've already said at the top, it's a one-of-a-kind freshwater CNC 44. If you want to race competitively or cruise in comfort, this boat is set up. So let's go down through the bullet point things, August, and just pick out some sort of features or things that they talk about, and let's sort of read between the lines on some of that stuff.
Yeah, we should mention, I'm not sure if we already did, but the price is 99,000 US dollars. And let's see here. We got a Yanmar 1985. It doesn't say which Yanmar it is.
It does say 44 horsepower.
44 horsepower, there we go, which is not a lot. They repeat, the boat is set up. And here we go. Recent maintenance, replacements, and upgrades are as follows. Dual autopilot systems, Yanmar engine panel, keel rebedded, chain plates rebedded. That's nice. Deck painted, cabin interior painted, Force 10 propane stove. Got a refrigeration system, sound system, bilge, pump blower, head, and fuel hoses replaced. Although it doesn't say when it was replaced.
I was going to get to that.
Interesting.
So keep reading down this, then we'll read the list, then we'll read between the lines.
Right. Water heater and water system components replaced. Some tankage upgraded. Red lights installed throughout cabin for night operations. Oh, they like red lights. That's a shocker. Lifelines, fans installed, cutlass bearing, R&R, mast wiring, R&R.
What does R&R mean, you think? Repaired and replaced?
I thought it was it like a brand or something, but I don't know.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it's never heard about it, but
yeah, I don't know what that means.
Probably could be, yeah. LED running lights, radar dome on gimbaled tower, radar twin network displays, VHF. I-70 instrument upgrades, NG NEMA 2K backbone, cell booster. What is a cell booster?
I think that's probably like a cell phone network extender.
Oh, thing. Right. Inner forestay with furling staysail.
Yeah, I think I was right about that picture then. For the furling staysail.
Oh, yeah.
On that deck fitting. Yeah, there you go.
Right. Storm trysail, sail track. Battery monitor, output Balmar alternator. Almost got one of those for Espion. Increased house battery bank. What does that mean? Dedicated engine battery.
I can't wait to pick this apart.
Yeah. Retractable bowsprit for asymmetrical, which is in bold. Running rigging R&R. So yeah, replaced in.
No, I wonder too. I wonder if R&R is like a refit yard, like a place that did all that work.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Teak modern glue down style on cockpit seats and sole. Replaced fixed ports. Larger opening ports added in cockpit. Galley countertops with deeper sink and upgraded faucet. S-bar heater, windlass, and custom anchor roller, plus many other items.
So if we go to the heading of that was things that were recently, what was it? Repairs,
replacements, and upgrades.
So let's just pause here for a second before we go further through the listing. I mean, this is like classic broker speak. It's like, how many items can I put on this list that may or may not have happened, quote unquote, recently? And let's be as vague as possible about them. So like, all this stuff sounds cool, but all this does for me is opens up a bunch of other questions. So if you stop scrolling around like a maniac, so I can see this.
I was looking at...
If you go like scroll up to the top of that list, you've got like, okay, keel rebedded, chain plates rebedded. Okay, well, there's like a good way to do that and the right way to do that. Like, does that mean that they actually took the keel off the boat, reattached it, inspected everything, and rebedded it? Or does it mean they just like dug out the caulk and the seam and put more caulk in? Same thing with the chain plates. Did they remove the chain plates entirely, clean them all up, and reinstall them with new sealant? Or were they just like dug out with everything in place? Because that's a major difference. Because if they weren't removed and replaced, then I would argue they didn't actually properly rebed them. They just kind of put a Band-Aid on it. Also, keel rebedded. Well, why? Was there a problem? That's
grounding, perhaps.
Bolt-on keel. That makes me a little bit nervous. Deck painted, cabin interior painted. Okay, recent repairs. Like when recent? This listing's from 2026. Was it done like our last listing? New sales 2017. Well, does recent mean 10 years ago or does it mean last year? So each one of these items, we don't have to go through every single one of them, but basically every single item on here creates more questions than answers for me.
For sure. I think it'd be interesting to see. Okay, so the Yanmar engine panel and the windlass is on the list of like new, recently fixed, right? If we have a look at that windlass,
Mm. It does look pretty nice. I
yeah,
would give
it's
it
not
that.
bad actually.
Yeah.
That is not bad.
Engine panel also
Engine
looks.
panel, it's
Those
not.
buttons look pretty worn out. That doesn't look new to me.
That does not look new, and it's even in this nice little recessed kind of nook here, and
Yeah.
it's got a lot of condensation
Yeah.
and foggy and moldy. Yeah, no. So this is almost not worth anything, right? Because we have no idea how old this stuff
Well, I
is.
mean, it's good information, but it's not complete information. It's just not. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, one thing that tells me a little bit, like the N2K backbone, like that's a relatively modern thing. That's good to see. A boat like this would have not. It's too old to have been built with that. So they've done upgrades at some point, but I'd
Hmm.
want to know a lot more than what that is telling me.
Yeah.
Um,
And the N2K can't be 20 years old because that didn't
no,
exist.
exactly.
So that's
So
why.
let's keep going down the listing here and get so this is just now the standard stuff, not stuff that was replaced. So I'll let you take it back here.
All right, so we're under sail and rigging now. So it says Dacron main, full battened, which is 4 battens with 2 reef points, hardly used. UK tape drive main, full battened, 5 battens with 3 reef points from 2010. So 2 mainsails on there.
So hang on, do you know what a tape drive mainsail is?
No.
This is a very racing specific thing. So you basically have this mast will have a like a luff groove in it, similar to what a roller furler will have, where you can either have sliders go in that luff groove for a traditional slab reefing main, which is what their Dacron main is, I assume. Again,
Hmm.
hardly used, but what does that mean? And then tape drive, I think, is basically you have the luff is a continuous bolt rope luff, just like on a jib, that
It's like a
slides up
foil.
that track and creates a much better interface between mast and sail. However, it means that when you reef it and when you lower it, it comes out of that track, and now you have
Right.
to deal with it. So that is a specific racing sail that requires crew just to, at the end of the day, to drop the sail. You can't just drop the sail because it's just going to come off the mast. And Mia and I delivered a FAR 39 that was a racing boat up the Chesapeake once that had that, and it was a freaking gigantic pain in the ass with just the two of us. So that is definitely not a cruising sail, but the fact that they have the other main tells you can go back and forth.
Yeah. And oh man, also with 5 battens as well, that's going to be unhandy.
Yes.
You cannot take that down. Interesting. Right. Okay, so we're moving on. We have on head sails, we have a number 1 light. Again with UK tape drive, which is slightly used. And we have a similar one, only a heavy cloth version. We have a number 2, again with the tape drive roller from 2013, which is used for 3 seasons. We have another number 2 from 2008, which is usable but tired. And then we have another number 2. It's 3 number 2 sails, which is which goes on the roller, which is Dacron, which is an older delivery sail. That's a nice cruising sail there. 1 number 3 tape drive with batten slightly used. A number 4, which is UK Dacron inner forestay furler. In bold, that was the one that you talked about with the fitting on that we saw on the fitting on the deck there, like new, slightly used. And then there's a staysail / drifter in it's a lighter material Dacron, which is older but usable.
I'm going to slow you down because if you read all of these other sails, it's going to take us the
It's
rest
a
of the day.
lot of sails.
And I got to go to the dentist, but basically I'm counting. Let's just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8. There's 19 sails that come with this boat.
Yeah.
4 symmetrical spinnakers and 4 asymmetrical spinnakers. 3 storm sails, a storm trysail, 2 storm jibs. Everything looks to be sort of 20 years old or so. So tons of sales. Clearly, the boat was used for racing. And I would say, reading between the lines on this, like right off the bat, the headline of this is it was a freshwater boat, so it's a Great Lakes boat, I assume, which is like
Oh yeah,
that's
that's
really, really good. That's a
very
huge
good.
benefit. And that basically, freshwater boats that are used in northern environments means they're basically probably only used for like a few months out of the year. And they're not getting the heat and saltwater corrosion that you get of boats that go to the Caribbean. So it really, really, really reduces the aging on all these components that you always hear us talking about. So,
Hmm.
like, I don't know, but a boat from 1985 that's been used exclusively in fresh water is going to look and be way nicer than a much newer boat that's been used in the Caribbean, for example. So that's a huge benefit of this. And man, there's so many freaking sales here that like you'll get by. You won't you use it for a couple seasons before you decide what you need to do, and it depends on how much racing you're actually going to do. Because the cool thing is, for a boat like this to race with, it's a relatively inexpensive purchase price, which means you could, if you really were into racing, you could spend some money on new racing sales and still have a nice little package for not a ton of money.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. I think the freshwater high latitudes thing is huge. I read somewhere once that like these standing rigging and like any exposed metal fittings age 8 times faster in the tropics than they do in, I don't know what was defined as high latitudes, but that's massive. And also
Yeah.
not having salt water is huge. I mean, you shouldn't really put your boats in salt water because they can't take salt water. So it's that is, yeah, huge point. I agree with that.
Yeah. So again, there's like a lot of information in here, but also not a lot of information. I guess they have probably the most information in the sales section here. And those sales, if you look at the pictures, those are clearly racing sails in these photos. I mean,
Oh yeah.
those are membrane string sails, as we call them. I mean, you can literally see through that mainsail.
Hmm.
You can see the spinnaker on the other side. So these are going to be, these are not cruising sails. And if they're racing sails, the question is, are they still usable if you're actually trying to be competitive? And that, I mean, just that red spinnaker, look at the freaking size of that thing. It's
It's
gigantic.
it's enormous. Enormous. I mean, what a fun boat to sail, though. Could you imagine with all of these options? Um,
I love the
that's really
fact that
cool.
they still have it appears they have the red spinnaker pole, at least in this photo, and then they also retrofit the bowsprit. And a lot of times you'll hear racing guys call that you turboing it. You're basically turning it in from a dead downwind symmetric kite boat to a more of a sailing jibing angles with a asymmetric kite. And frankly, like having had a bunch of boats that sail with symmetric spinnakers, it's so much easier to sail with an asymmetric kite if you're jibing, like so much easier. So I don't know how that's going to affect the rating performance of this boat in terms of racing. It's definitely going to make it a worse rating having that asymmetrical bowsprit on there. But just from an ease of handling standpoint, you'll be able to race this boat with fewer crew and less stress jibing for sure. In fact, I
Yeah.
bought we installed a little tack fitting on the new Spica so I can fly an asymmetric kind of cruising spinnaker because in the archipelago, you're like, there's stuff in the way all the time. And I wanted to be able to
Hmm.
jibe the boat quickly downwind instead of, I'd never fly the symmetric kite otherwise. So even though the boat was designed for a symmetric kite, we're doing an asymmetric kind of cruising kite.
Yeah. I love with the symmetrical one on Espion, and yet I was looking into getting a bowsprit for Espion at one point, because I feel like the one thing that you don't get with the spinnaker pole setup is the ability to go upwind in very light airs
Yep.
with a code zero
Yep.
sail that you can put from the bowsprit. And interestingly, this boat doesn't have one of those. Can you imagine
Yeah.
that?
Interesting.
That's like what I would say is the number one upgrade you would get from installing a removable bowsprit like that. And even though they have, what was it, like 19 sails, they don't have a code zero. That I find is weird. But yeah, that is also something that you could do.
What okay, to wrap up the broker BS, where on the BS versus reality scale do you like how much bullshit do you think is in this listing?
I think there's a lot. It's clearly they are only showing us the good side of things, and they are redacting any details that might not be favorable. Like not having any details on when this stuff was done is a little suspicious to me. And also, there's like no history of these things. The sales is interesting. There's a lot of information on the sales, which I quite like. Um, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really trust this info
Yeah,
very
I'd
much.
give this probably a 7 out of 10 on the BS scale. And ironically, I've always thought about this. It's like I feel like there's like we should start a brokerage where it's like full transparency. We just pick these things apart. I think you'd actually have an easier time selling boats that way, but whatever. So I'll give you this a 7 out of 10 on the BS scale. Okay, moving along in our categories because we're again an hour into this and we're only halfway through our categories. But I think we've gotten through the big ones so far. So August, this boat's from 1985. Another one that's over 40 years old. What has aged the best in your mind, and what has aged the worst with this boat? I know exactly what I'm going to say on what aged the worst.
Me too. Me too. Interesting. Interesting. But best first.
Sure.
I think that the rig is great. I love it. This is the kind of boat that I have by far the most experience with, so that I'm a little biased in that regard. But having that massive four triangle and the symmetrical spinnaker and tons of winches and this that kind of sailing is just so fun. I just love that. So I
That's
think
perfect
cannot
because
go wrong with that.
that's actually my what's aged the worst.
Oh,
I'm
really?
sick of that, man. Not so much that I like all the winches, I like the options, I like the pole and all that stuff. I do not like the runners and check stays. Like I never really liked Ice
Mm.
Bear's rig. Those not any forward or aft shrouds it's just a pain. It's just a pain in the butt. So to me, that's aged the worst, and it's literally aged the worst because you don't boats are not built like that anymore. All modern boats have swept-back spreaders and no need for runners or any of that stuff. It just makes it so much simpler. So that your age the
Mm.
best is my age the worst. So what is age the worst for you then on the other side of that?
The stern is what's aged the worst for me. I mean, I love these IOR boats for so many reasons, but that kind of reverse transom stern is not for me. I think I don't think it on some boats it kind of looks great, and I like the symmetry and the kind of little kind of spaceship look it gives off, but it's just so impractical.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
so I mean, and that is like clearly one of those IOR things that was made to kind of tweak the. It was, I believe, it was introduced to change like where you started to measure the boat. That's why they did that, because from there's no like that. It doesn't help the boat like in
It
any way.
looks
Like
stupid, and also like if you're trying to swim off the back of that boat, that's like very awkward ladder situation.
super awkward. Like you still find the reverse stern in like some modern designs, but then you have like the sugar scoop
Cut out,
thing,
yeah, yeah.
so you can access the water really easily. But yeah, you see here with this ladder kind of around the backstay here,
Yeah.
it makes it very complicated. So this whole space is very tough to deal with, and it's so just kind of working with this area is so hard. Like I installed a wind vane on our Baltic 37, which had an exact stern like that. It's just so tricky to work with surfaces like that, and also this interior space like underneath this
Yeah.
completely useless. So that is the part that aged the worst for me by
And I
far.
didn't say what aged the best. I would say just the overall design of the boat, the look. I like the way the boat looks. I think it's a cool looking
Mm.
boat. And they don't make cool looking boats like this anymore. So that's what's aged the best to me. Is just aside from I don't know that I would have gone all in on the red. I like the red hull, but I mean this radar pole and the mast. I don't know. But
The radar pole, that's something that you want to hide. You don't want to show off
exactly.
a radar pole. But they
other
painted
than
it
that,
bright burgundy red. It's
the design of the boat, I think, has aged well for me. Okay, moving along. Best feature. What's the best feature, do you think, on the boat here? That's maybe in the same category as aged the best, but what do you think is the single best feature?
best feature. I would say, I'm gonna pick something else. I really like the nav station.
Yeah.
There's something, I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about having the nav station on the port side that just makes so much sense to me. Maybe it's because I use like a computer mouse with my right hand, possibly, but this just feels very homely to me. And it's also a great nav station. Like the way this is set up and all the gear around here, plenty of space for your charts, great support. Yeah, I really like that nav station.
I would say my favorite feature is actually a retrofitted feature, but I love this the staysail, the furling staysail, which is going to be on a luff line furler, where it's an integrated structural furler, basically. That's such a cool way to have a heavy weather staysail, because you can take the whole stay down and put the sail away, and it's just like a really nice feature. So that's, to me, my favorite feature, that furl away staysail.
That is really cool.
Okay, ironically, given the color of the boat, next category, biggest red flag.
Biggest red flag. I mean, again, I think it's the lack of information about when all these things were done. I mean, that's kind of what gives me pause here. And also, there wasn't really any information about the engine. There was just
only that it's 1985. It's the original engine.
It was original engine.
It doesn't say that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It says 1985. It doesn't include engine hours or anything. So like that's
a red flag right there.
Probably the red flag. I wonder if the engine's painted red.
Could be. And as you noticed, no pictures of the engine.
None
either.
At all. That's yeah. There you go. That's an red flag. I'll agree with you on there.
Yeah.
We have no information on the engine or the engine room.
Yeah.
Black box.
Although the engine access looks actually quite good.
It does.
It's underneath here, which is always good.
When you have to pull it out to replace it.
That's exactly right. But I like engines with easy access is almost always better maintained than engines without.
Yeah, that's true.
But still, no, that is a massive one. Yeah.
Incidentally, that segues into our next category, project creep. If you bought this boat, where does the spending spiral begin? Might be in the engine room.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would say the project creep, I touched on this at the beginning, it's almost certainly going to be in the balsa.
Right. Yeah,
it's going to be, if you find soft spots in that deck, or God forbid in the hull, that's a deal breaker for me. I mean, that would be down to, I'd want to make sure that I get a very thorough survey on those balsa areas and know exactly what you're getting before you make the plunge here, because that's a huge project.
Yeah. Do we know if this has a sail drive or an axle?
Don't know that either.
No pictures out of the water. That whole engine situation is mysteriously, suspiciously shrouded in.
Even on sailboat data, the line drawings don't show the underwater profile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Another red flag. I mean, actually, the biggest red flag probably on the whole listing that we actually know of, because they tell us, is that the keel was rebed. Like, what does that mean?
That is interesting.
That's a huge. That they're trying to make it sound like that was a good thing, but maybe it's routine, but I don't know. That sounds scary to me. Anytime you start talking about messing around with the keel, that makes me nervous. I will say though, the keels on the CNCs were lead, so that's a good thing. They're not lead's the right material, as opposed to uranium. You did that little keel video on the Quarterdeck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, lead. That is what you want for sure. But I mean, there's a lot of, what is it, 8.5 feet of draft. I mean, that is, if you hit something with that going, God knows how fast, in this.
Big
That's a
lever arm.
lot of torque into the hulls. Yeah, I'd be very curious to know the if there was any grounding history.
Okay. Next category. Where on the scale? Fantasy versus reality. Is this a fantasy listing or a realistic listing?
I I think like if you wanted to be like competitive, I think you would have to some work to do, and you know there's sales roles and there's quite a few things to do. But I'm looking at this. I'm back to where I was, you know, 20 years ago, looking at boats to kind of sail around the world as a young man with my buddies, and I think this boat would be just perfect for that. And yeah, you know, so, I mean, some things might not be great, and you know, maybe the maybe the engine is not the best, and maybe it only starts on good days. And but you, I mean, you can have some fantastic offshore adventures on this, if you got you know all the safety gear that you needed. Um, but also, I think for just like casual racing, or if you enjoy the sailing part of cruising, I think this would be a great boat.
Yeah, which brings us to fantasy versus. I think it's reasonably realistic. I don't know. Maybe I put it in the middle, 5 out of 10, fantasy versus reality, because I think you're gonna end up. I think there's gonna be a lot to do on this boat potentially, depending on what you're using it for. Um, but but I don't think they're necessarily. There's just again, it's just not. There's not that much information in the listing, so
Mm.
it's hard to say. But next category, August. Who is this boat for?
Hmm. I would say I I think it is a young and energetic person's boat. I think it's like a lot of these. It's going to require quite a. There's a lot of work to sail this boat. It's going to be quite active, and you're gonna need to enjoy you know setting the poles. And I mean if your mainsail is on a foil, that is a and you have the runners and the check stays and all that jazz is going to be you're going to be very involved with the sailing part of it. So I think you know if you want to go cruising and the kind of sailing part is just a means to an end for you, if you just want to kind of explore new places and see people and scenery, I don't think this is a boat for you. You gotta love the actual sailing side of things to get into this.
I actually don't think this boat is for anyone when you actually dig into it, because if you're looking at like you said young people, okay, this would be a great fun boat for a group of friends to have to sail around the bay or club race with or whatever, but it's maybe too big. Like if you got young people on a budget,
Mm.
this is going to be an expensive boat to keep in a dock, expensive boat to buy new sails for. Like you could get exactly the same fun factor on basically on a CNC 37, like or a 35. Like you don't need for that kind of sailing, you don't need a 44 footer. This boat's not going to be for a competitive racing sailor because it's not competitive anymore. In those terms, it's not modern enough. It's not fast enough. It might be competitive on handicap, but it's going to need too much like new sails, too much upgrade. If you want to actually be competitive, you're gonna have to put a lot more money into it. If you want to go cruising with it, it needs some upgrades, and you also really need to like sailing with it. And again, so I don't know. I think this is, and I think that's reflected in the price point. I mean, it seems like a lot of boat for $99,000, but I think that is because like who is this for? I think this boat has an extremely limited market. I think this has to be a boat for somebody that like really loves the CNC 44. Like that's their dream boat. Like I have to have a CNC 44. This seems to be a pretty good example of that, but I just think it's too big and expensive to be like a club racer, and yeah, too intense to be sort of a boat for a couple to sail in retirement, even if they're day sailing on the bay. I mean, certainly it's not a bay boat for 8.5 feet draft, so you have to be somewhere deep. I just think there's a very limited audience for this boat based on how it's currently set up, the draft, everything like that. So I'm not sure who this boat is for, to be honest. I don't know who this boat is for.
You'll need a big crew to sail this.
I know, yeah.
You need a big crew, and you know what? I'm right. I think, like, considering the price, and what it would cost, I think you're right. And I would love to go blue water sailing with this boat. I think that would be fantastically fun. I think, like, under any conditions, in any point of sail, you just have so many great options, and I think the boat would deliver.
I'll tell you
every
what,
time. But
I think I know who this boat is for now. I think this boat is for somebody like Emma, or a young person that wants to start doing sail training stuff, kind of like what we did. This would be a great boat to do sail training on. This would be a fantastic boat to do sail training on, because you've got a lot of bunks down below. You've got a good setup for a big crew. This would be a cool boat to do, say, like 6-pack, if you're in the U.S., 6-pack charters, sail training charters, or stuff like that. I think that would be the best use case for this, actually. But again, there's very few people that are going to do that. But I think that's kind of maybe the only use case for something like this, because you don't need to be competitive in racing. This is very similar to Emma's Navy 44 that she bought.
That's true, yeah.
But it's also telling that she used it for 2 seasons and then decided to do something else. So, because it's very difficult to do that. But I think that might be a good use case for this.
Yeah. And I think, the price is high, and also, it is going to be very expensive to outfit this for offshore racing with, getting all the comms and the life raft and the EPIRBs and everything. Like, the boat doesn't have any of that, and that's going to add to the price.
Last category. Would you buy this boat?
If I was back in my early 20s and I only had one sailing friend, my good buddy Vega, and we ended up sailing on the Baltic 37. If me and Vega had like 3 or 4 more buddies who were into the same thing, I think maybe.
I mean, you kind of did buy this boat. The Baltic 37 is basically this boat smaller, and like you say, if you had 3 more people to share it with, there you go. That's who this boat is for.
Yeah, I think so.
I would not buy this boat, because I think the only reason I would buy this boat is to do a sail training thing on or something like that. And I think there's 5 other boats I'd probably buy before this. And I would not buy this boat just because I promised myself I'd never buy another boat that has any balsa in it. So that's probably the deal breaker for me.
That is a good point. And I would need to know a lot more about this boat and all these so-called recent upgrades.
I'm so full of shit though, because like, if I find a boat that I love, it could be made out of balsa and I would buy it. Like, I say that, but it's like, when the time comes, if my heart wants to do something, it's going to do it. So.
Well, yeah, that is right. But I mean, that's telling though that you're not like this doesn't like pull at your heartstrings either, I don't think.
I mean, I said what aged the best is that it looks cool. I like the design, but it's there's other boats that I think look cooler, and that's cool factor for me is, I mean, this boat is oozing with cool factor, but I think there's other ones that even have more. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Great, cool. Well, Brian, if you're listening to this, if you've got a bunch of friends out there want to go club racing, buy the boat. I'll come race on it with you. Sail to Sweden. We'll do Gotland Runt on it. Finally finish that race course. So there you have it. Thanks for submitting the listing, and those of you that made it this far in the episode, thanks for listening. Submit more listings, even if you're not interested in actually buying it. It's just, I mean, it's fun talking about boats. Hey, August.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we need more listings so we can keep doing this. And I mean, especially if you come across something weird, like something unique, or whatever, I think we'd love to talk about it anyways. And join us on the Quarterdeck to submit your listings and to find all of these and join the discussion on there.
Cool. All right, Skipper. Until next time.
Hold fast.